Hello. I haven't listened to that full song in a little bit. Sounds good.
Yeah, it feels good, doesn't it?
So how are you doing?
I'm doing well. So today there was the summit for the CIS, which is a treaty where it's a lot of Central Asian and Belarus together, where they have, I guess, now it's been amped up because of the coup in Kazakhstan last year. From now it's like an official defense organization that is, I guess, kind of like it's like a way to protect people from U.S. coups.
Yeah.
So it was in St. Petersburg today, and only yesterday I found out, and then I was like, I want to get in, and I almost did. So I emailed people, and then they asked me to fill out the form, and then they said that because I was late, there wasn't a room, but if somebody canceled, they'd let me in. Yeah. And then and now I'm accredited so that I can get in. So next time we might even have Lukashenko on Latenights with Lenin. Yeah. And that just shows you the difference, because can you imagine somebody from Gray Zone getting into a White House press briefing?
Yeah.
No.
No, it's not going to happen. They only allow who they allow in, and that's it. Like
I think the instructions will be shoot first, ask questions later, or something like that, right?
Yeah. So Alex says, "Peace, comrades. Peace, Alex.
Peace, son." Or no.
Peace.
This is no. No, which one is fuck?
It's that one.
No, that one.
That no.
No.
I want to tell you what that one is. It's such. That's it. Okay.
What is this? What is this?
Don't do it.
Okay. I got confused.
No, that's all right. It's okay. It's all right.
Live long and prosper.
It could mean something else. I know it to mean something sexual, so I'm just all right.
Okay. I won't do that.
And no peace without justice. But yeah, peace eventually in amongst us now. Okay. Carlos says, he's speaking. He's doing Nicaragua. He's doing Spanish, so I'm not going to.
Okay, let me reread it. Okay, hold on. Give me 1 second. This is going to be a little complicated because I haven't set up my full gear. No. Okay. Saludos desde Nicaragua. He says hi from Nicaragua. Salutations from Nicaragua.
Yes. I knew that. I just don't like butchering other languages unless I have to read a word or something. Okay. Because I have a horrible tongue. I can't even speak English very well. So, Stern wants to know, is Tavarish how they say comrade in Russia? How do they say comrade? Tavarish.
And Lenin's one of his famous speech at Finland Station. He starts with tavarishi, which means male comrades and female comrades.
Okay. All right. Good to know. All right. So Ashley was just talking about how she almost got into not like a press conference. What was it? Like it
was a summit. So it was a meeting between the head of state of Kazakhstan, Azerbaijan, Turkmenistan, Belarus, and Russia, and Armenia.
All right. So next time you might get in there and
Yeah, next time I just have to apply to get in. I just have to like fill out the form early enough and not do it last minute. I need to know ahead of time.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
all. And so if I had filled it out by the deadline, I would have gotten in. Or if a journalist had gotten sick, I would have gotten in today.
Nice, nice.
Yeah, and this is like so against the narrative of Russia in that like like they didn't even care who I was. Like they
Yeah, that's
almost
what
let me in.
when you mentioned that to me, that was the one thing I go like. I use the word bureaucratic, but there is a lot of paperwork, so there is a
Yeah,
little bit of bureaucratic. But like we wouldn't be able to apply to go see a summit at the White House. You know what I mean? Like we wouldn't be able to get into these things that
yeah,
easily. Just filling out some forms. So
exactly. And now I'm already accredited for it. So next time they said they'll invite me next time. So I just have to and I have to fill out one more form and yeah, I can even get questions from you guys. Inshallah.
yeah, we'll see. All right, so there was this you wanted me to share something. Hold on one second.
Yeah. Today on Twitter, I saw this, and first I thought it was just a glorified Twitter troll, but it is the European Parliament.
And
Can
I
you
don't
read
know.
this?
Do you want me to read it out? Okay, it
Because I
says
can't see it.
January 31st in Brussels, they're having a European Parliament. It's the
Mhm.
V Forum, V Free Nations of Post Russia Forum. So if
Yeah.
you'll notice this map, and I was like, what is this flag?
Yeah,
um,
all the flags look really familiar, don't they?
so oops, I think I just hit something. So yeah, it says imperial ideology from Muscovy to the Russian Mir, conquest of exploration from Ivan the Terrible to Vladimir Putin.
Yeah, let's start with like no, let's not start with Ivan the Terrible. Let's even go earlier. Why don't we start with the I don't know. Ivan the Terrible is Ivan the Fourth. Let's go back a century and do I don't know whatever was here before.
So the impact of Moscow's attack on Ukraine on nations and regions in the Russian Federation and de-imperialization. Notice like is a
It
denazification,
came from Brussels, you mother effers.
imperialization, and decolonization.
From
The
Brussels.
the prison of nations, the prison of nations after the war. Western policy towards Russia beyond the status quo.
Yeah,
Oh,
this is like a masturbatory fantasy of the West that they want to balkanize Russia into 100 different nations. And at first, I swear to God, I thought it was a Twitter troll until I saw that it was the European Parliament.
it's just I mean it's just nuts to take like could you imagine the reaction if someone took the United States, split it all up like that, put different flags on it?
And then at the Russian State Duma had a meeting about what to do with the post USA. Like they just wouldn't dream of doing it because it would be so uncouth here, I guess. It's
Mm-hmm.
just cycle.
Yes, and then there
But
was
to have it at the European Parliament means it's blessed by the highest levels of the European Parliament, right?
yeah, yeah.
That's just gross.
Okay, and then this is
Well, this is me catching some fake news today. So she said, "Oh, look, we should feel sorry for the Ukrainian children."
and then
Now let's
actually,
look at the photo she used. It took from a bloody book cover.
yes,
She couldn't even find a proper Ukrainian child to take a photo of. It's from like a bloody book, the Spanish edition of like some a weird book about the forgotten human beings.
yes. So yeah, that I mean that's what they always do. It's like and their excuse will be, oh well, it's just a symbol. We're just using this as a symbol. But if you're showing something that's so devastating, and it's happening so much, then you must have picture. You must have proof.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I have pictures because when I was in Lugansk, I spoke to a bunch of school children, and they had written letters to, like, it was like a form of therapy
Mhm.
on how to cope with war. And their teacher allowed them to write a letter to anyone. And I actually took all the letters that they wrote to the president. It was so sad. Yeah, but I need to translate it, but I will.
Yeah. So, all right. Do you want to get into the reading, or do you have anything else?
Yeah, let us get into the reading. Okay, so we will. Can you share the link? It is Left-Wing Communism and Infantile Disorder. Actually, before we start, let me quickly explain two Marxist concepts, which will be very important for our next week's reading. It's called a right-wing deviation and a left-wing deviation. So when you are a Marxist party who wants to represent the people, the idea is that Lenin has said this: you have to meet people wherever they are at, right? So if you're ahead of the people, like one example would be like would be the what's it? Gavel Principio, who assassinated the Archduke Ferdinand in order to get like a free Yugoslavia. And unfortunately, the people weren't really at his level, right? Like, so what he did ended up just like creating a lot of chaos. But because he was ahead of the people, eventually people caught up to where he was. But what he did was a left-wing deviation.
Mm-hmm.
A right-wing deviation, think of the Democratic Party, is where you're behind the people.
Yeah.
So, for example, the people for the past 10 years have been ready for Medicare for all, but the Democratic Party is behind the people, as in they're not at the level of where the people are.
Yeah.
So they're both failures on the part of the party to represent people. And this week, Lenin is, in Left-Wing Communism and Infantile Disorder, he's talking about the German left who are deeply afflicted with left-wing deviationism, basically.
Yeah.
And then we'll figure out who does not know what right-wing deviation means next week.
Yeah. All right.
Okay, so let's start. Left-wing communism and infantile disorder. And feel free to jump in for any comments, Janet, okay? No compromises. In the quotation from the Frankfurt pamphlet, we have seen how emphatically the lefts have advanced this slogan, no compromises. It is sad to see people who consider themselves Marxists and want to be Marxists forget the fundamental truths of Marxism. This is what Engels, who like Marx, one of those rarest authors whose every sentence in every one of their fundamental works contains a remarkably profound content, wrote in 1874 against the manifesto of the 33 Blankist communards. We are communists, the Blankist communards wrote in their manifesto, because we want to attain our goal without stopping at intermediate stations, without any compromises, which only postpone the day of victory and prolong the period of slavery. The German communists, and now he's switching to German, I don't know, it's still Blankist, okay. The German communists are communists because through all the intermediate stations and all the compromise created, not by them, but by the course of historical development, they clearly perceive and constantly pursue the final aim, the abolition of classes and the creation of a society in which there will be no longer private ownership of land or the means of production. The 33 Blankists are communists because they imagine that merely because they want to skip the intermediate stations and compromises, the matter is settled. And if it begins in the next few days, for which they take for granted, and they take over power, communism will be introduced the day after tomorrow. If that is not immediately possible, they are not communists. What childish innocence is to present one's own impatience as a theoretically convincing argument. That's funny. Friedrich Engels' Program of the Blankist Communards, from the German Social Democratic newspaper Volksstadt, 1874. Number 73, given in the Russian translation of articles 1871 to 1875, Petrograd, 1919, page 52 to 53.
So just just stop there for the Blankist. She's a Blankism was what Louis. What was his name? Louis.
Louis Blanc.
Louis Blanc. Louis Auguste Blanc, right? So he
Mm-hmm.
was French, but he was interested in doing, and Engels does actually explain this in the
Mm-hmm.
piece that is being quoted, that he was interested in like basically like little coups, like to have a secretive group be the ones
Mm-hmm.
that take over, and so basically like to not involve everybody, not get everyone behind it, just have this one group do it, and then kind of tell everyone what they're going to be doing. That was kind of his thing, right?
Yeah, and that's a little insane because the entire point of having a dictatorship of the proletariat is that the proletariat are driving the whole thing from start to finish.
Yeah, and he gets into he's going to get into talking about Valan and Guzd. These are all people. So this is all like coming out of the Paris Commune. Like it's
Yeah,
all so Blanc at the time was he was in prison. So one of the things they were trying to do was to try to get him. Like that was one of the stipulations they made, was to free him.
yeah,
So he wasn't really involved in the Paris Commune, but he had people there. So I think that's what the 33
yeah.
were at the Paris Commune is what they mean.
In the same article, Engel expresses his profound esteem for Vaillant and speaks of the unquestionable merit of the latter, who, like Guesde, was one of the most prominent leaders of international socialism until their betrayal of socialism in August 1914. So, in August 1914, all the socialist parties around the world agreed not to vote for war credits in order to start the Imperial War of Conquest, as Lenin called it, or World War I, as you guys call it. And then Kautsky, who was the head of the German Social Democratic Party, stabbed them in the back and decided to vote for war credits.
Yes.
And that's why Lenin hated him for the rest of his life.
Yeah, but I think he's saying here too, it wasn't just Kautsky. Like there's a bunch of them that did
But
this.
Lenin directed majority of his rage towards Kautsky.
Yeah.
But Engels does not fail to give a detailed analysis of, does not fail to give of an obvious error. Of course, the very young and inexperienced revolutionaries, as well as the petty bourgeoisie revolutionaries of even very respectable age and great experience, it seems dangerous, incomprehensible, and wrong to permit compromises. Many sophists, this is really funny, and it's much funnier in Russian. Nowadays, I read it once in English and then I read it once in Russian because I don't know why, but he's way funnier in Russian. Any theories about that?
Well, I mean, it's the original language, so he's
Okay.
words, right?
Yeah, he's very funny in Russian.
Yeah.
Many sophists, being unusually or excessively experienced politicians, reason exactly in the same way as the British leaders of opportunism mentioned by Comrade Lansbury. He was like a figure who was emerging labor leader.
Yeah.
If the Bolsheviks are permitted a certain compromise, if the Bolsheviks are permitted a certain compromise, why should we not be permitted any kind of compromise? However, proletarians schooled in numerous strikes to take only this manifestation of class struggle, usually assimilate in admirable fashion the very profound truth, philosophical, historical, political, and psychological, expounded by Engels. Every proletarian who has been through strikes or has experienced compromises with the hated oppressors and exploiters, when the workers have had to return to work without either having achieved anything or else agreeing only to a partial satisfaction of their demands.
I put a note here, like I mean, he's basically saying everyone always compromises. You're always going to compromise. You can't. Not everyone's going to agree 100% on things. So there's always going to be compromises. So
and sometimes it's just not physically possible to not compromise. I mean,
yeah.
His car robber example. If a car robber comes and holds a gun to your head and says, "Give me your car and money, and I'll be rid of your company," you're going to do it. But that's not the same as if you're like an accomplice with the robber and you help rob somebody else, right?
Yeah.
Uh,
Every proletarian.
every proletarian, as a result of these conditions, every has experienced which the hated and oppressors and exploiters. When the workers have had to return to work without having achieved anything or else agreeing only to a partial satisfaction of demands. Every proletarian, as a result of the conditions of mass struggle and acute intensification of class antagonisms he lives among, sees the difference between a compromise enforced by objective conditions, such as lack of strike funds, no outside support, starvation, and exhaustion.
Yeah.
A compromise which in no way minimizes the revolutionary devotion and readiness to carry the struggle on the part of the workers who have agreed to such a compromise, and on the other hand, a compromise by traitors who ascribe to objective causes their self-interest. AOC, strike breakers also enter into compromise. Their cowardice, desire to toady to the capitalist, and readiness to yield to intimidation, sometimes to persuasion, sometimes to sops, like little sprinkles, and sometimes to flattery from the capitalist, AOC. The history of the British labor movement provides a very large number of instances of such treacherous compromises by British trade union leaders. But in one form or another, almost all workers in all countries have witnessed the same sort of thing. And
So like we don't. I'm gonna like as you're reading this again now. My thought is moving towards like the punching up and punching down. Like so, if the compromises are punching down on people, that we don't like those aren't really compromises that we need to totally adhere to all the time, and we shouldn't. But it seems like those are the ones because they have the money. Those are the compromises the left keeps making for us, the representatives of the left.
Yeah.
But like we don't really need to worry. Like those are capitalists and they're hurting people. So we need to, so when we take a no compromise, maybe, we have to have the, understanding of what we're compromising and what we're not compromising too. Like you can't just not, compromise on everything. You can't do that. You have to kind of, for the people, a compromise for the people.
Yeah, you have to like make sure the people get the most that they can get with with the situation at hand at that moment in time. Yeah, I mean the Yalta Agreement was a compromise with two imperialist capitalist scumbags, but the people got a lot. Like without the Yalta Agreement, there would be no DPRK. There would be no like everything in the Eastern Bloc, India, China, like all of that, all of Africa's happened because of that. But you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it was a compromise, definitely, because the final goal should have been farther west, maybe London or I don't know, whatever it was.
Yeah.
But at that moment, with what the resource, like basically, it was just the Soviet Union, and like there was no India, there was not really a China. Most of the third world countries were kind of fractured. Like there were no countries established yet, so that was about as much as the
they're all under imperial. Yeah.
Naturally, these individual cases of exceptional difficulty and complexity, when the greatest efforts are necessary for a proper assessment of the actual character of this or that compromise. Just as there are cases of homicide when it is by no means easy to establish whether the homicide was fully justified and even necessary, as for example, legitimate self-defense, or due to unpardonable negligence, or even to a cunningly executed perfidious plan. Of course, in politics, where it is sometimes a matter of extremely complex relations, national and international, between classes and parties, very many cases will arise that will be much more difficult than the question of legitimate compromise in a strike or a treacherous compromise by a strike breaker or a treacherous leader. I
wanted to just make a little comment there. Like, I feel like this is getting into, so one of the biggest issues that, like, say the anarchists that were kicked out of, the United States and sent back to Russia, or, even like Kropotkin and stuff with Lenin was, that, the collectives and the stuff like that. But what Lenin was saying is like, these were like really highly compromised groups with, within that, the capitalists, the Western Europeans and stuff like that. Like they were overrun by the bourgeois thought, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so then that is why, like, you have to look at that, like, we have to be open to compromise, but we need to make sure that it's not a compromise that's going to overrun us, overrun the
Yeah.
left, and that we're not moving to the right because we
Yeah.
did compromises. All right, I just wanted to, sorry.
Exactly. Okay. It would be absurd to formulate a general recipe or a general rule, no compromise to suit all cases. One must use one's own brain to be able to find one's bearing in each particular instance. It is, in fact, one of the functions of a party organization and of party leaders worthy of the name to acquire, through prolonged persistence, variegated and comprehensive efforts of all thinking representatives of a given class, the knowledge, experience, and in addition to knowledge and experience, the political flair necessary for the speedy and correct solution of complex problems.
He had
Naive and
he had a note there that he extended, um, which was kind of funny. Like, he just extended, like, within every class, even in the conditions prevailing in the most enlightened countries, even within the most advanced class, and even when the circumstances of the moment have aroused all its spiritual forces to an exceptional degree, there always are and inevitably will be, as long as classes exist, as long as classless society has not fully consolidated itself and has not developed on its own foundations, representatives of the class who do not think and are incapable of thinking for themselves. Capitalism would not be the oppressor of the masses that is actually that it actually is, if things were otherwise. So I just thought that was important, because it is explaining, yes, people always like bring up the whole thing, well, there are people that need leaders, you know, and what that is saying to me is, like, okay, like, under capitalism, or under like the feudal system, or under, what we've had in the past, yes, we did. So you can't go from A to B. This is a very important point of why there was a state. So I just wanted to bring that up,
yeah,
because
you can't like leapfrog. It's kind of funny because Lenin uses I learned a new word. Actually, it's kind of, when you read Lenin and Russian, sometimes you can weird people out by using like kind of old-fashioned words that no one uses anymore. So sometimes I accidentally give people the impression that I speak better Russian because I accidentally use a word Lenin used, and they're like, "Oh, you use a fancy old-fashioned word," and I'm like, "Oopsie daisy." But I learned this word. It's called viprigat, which means like to jump over. The pereprigat, which is jump over. And so, yeah, he's like, it's literally in Russian. It's like such a good imagery. It's like a dolphin does, like that.
yeah,
Like, yeah, you can't do that. And Lenin then uses the word like swimming through. You have to swim through the
yeah. So you're not
ocean.
leaping over like the dolphin. You're swimming through. You have to swim
Yeah,
through all the stages. Yeah.
yeah.
So
It's just a really good imagery that doesn't translate well to English somehow. People get lost in the metaphor there.
yeah,
Naive and inexperienced people imagine that the permissibility of a compromise in general is sufficient to obliterate any distinction between opportunism, against which we are waging and must wage an unremitting struggle, and revolutionary Marxism or communism. But if such people do not yet know that in nature and in society all distinctions are fluid, and up to a point conventional, nothing can help them but lengthy training, education, enlightenment, political, and everyday experience. This comes out meaner in Russian somehow. Education translates to literacy, so it comes out really meaner. In practical questions that arise in the politics of any particular or specific historical moment, it is important to single out those which display the principle of intolerable and treacherous compromises, such as an embody an opportunism that is fatal to the revolutionary class, and to exert all efforts to explain them and combat them.
I
During
wanted
the
to
1940s.
right there, like he's basically saying why it is important to know your theory and the history around it, because like to
Mhm.
understand what is going on, like why, like what made these conditions better, what made them worse, like
Yeah.
what should we try to do, what is the theory going forward. And that's,
Mhm.
that is basically him just laying it out there, why we have to understand theory.
Yeah. Like today, even I saw this right winger had this really stupid, ignorant tweet about I can't pronounce it, the Romanian leader who was murdered in 1989, Ceausescu, maybe.
Yeah.
Um. Anyways, the thing is that he paid off the IMF loans, and then he was trying to get off the petrodollar, and of course he was boomed by the CIA for obvious reasons, like the same exact
Yeah.
thing that happened to Gaddafi and Saddam Hussein. Anyway, somebody's like, well, why would a leftist take an IMF loan? And it's like, because Romania had been through a world war and everything had been destroyed. Like, factories do not grow in the wild. You need to get somebody who knows how to build a factory and kind of entice them to come and build it for you. And then you can eventually take over. But he was kind of stuck because it was World War II and every other country around him was more destroyed than his country. Like, they couldn't help,
It's
right?
also they're taking IMF loans when they first were available, right? So you didn't know, like they didn't have the foresight, like
Exactly.
they might have
He couldn't see the
thought
future.
it. They probably were like, it's a little, hanky me going that way, but like they probably didn't realize just how bad it could get doing this.
Yeah. But first, yes, that's the first point. He like there's they can't tell the future, so they probably wouldn't. They have never experienced with this kind of predatory debt instrument.
Yeah,
The second thing is that there's not like you can't let like otherwise like Romania would have been a third world
yeah,
country and like people so because of that Romania I read all this like Romania was like exporting a lot of crap like they were building buildings in India, Pakistan, Ethiopia, so it was really like it helped them a lot,
yeah.
but then the of course the problem happened when he paid
Well,
off the loans when
it's
he actually got Romania, and the very next right after they shot him, the next dictator that the US backed dictator, he literally like he did what's her name, the Agnes did in Bolivia where they're like, oh my god, Bolivia too, oh my god, in 2019 Evo Morales paid off all the all the IMF loans.
so the trick is not to pay off your IMF loans.
Well,
That's what you're
no,
saying.
because Agnes came in and she took it back, but then when Louis Arce came, he just like threw the $250 million back in their faces and told them to get the fuck out. But yeah, it just made because I was like the next dictator did exactly what Agnes did, and then I was like, wait a minute, that's also what happened to Bolivia.
Yeah.
So yeah, yeah. So basically they because he got out like the IMF like they need that debt instrument to like kind of keep the semi colony going.
Mm-hmm.
So they literally they didn't follow the rules. They just shot him and then got like a puppet who was gonna just agree to whatever the IMF wanted.
Yeah, I mean, basically, the United States is a mafia, and
Yeah.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
But I just remember this leftist was like, "Why did he have to do?" And it's like, what else was he like? There was not like the more you study with socialist leaders, you realize the less you actually can criticize them.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's what like that goes. Like everyone wants to put all these criticisms on socialist leaders, and but if you like look at like the conditions as to why they made those decisions, so and that leans into why did Lenin go with a state? Lenin went with a state because first of all he understood that there was this whole thing of the state was going to you needed the state to begin with because you can't leapfrog, like, so he understood
Yeah.
that, but also they needed the protection, like I
Yeah.
mean what were you gonna what would have happened to the Soviets, like
They would
within
have been done in 2 weeks.
yeah they would have
Exactly like what happened to the Paris Commune.
yeah, yep,
And
exactly,
even Kim Il Sung, if you read his idea of Juche, the idea, it's actually pretty anarchist. And you know that the DPR, if a lot of American anarchists weren't so racist, they'd like totally love the DPR. You know that the right to have a co-op is in the DPRK Constitution. But his idea of juche is the same exact thing. While it may start off with centralized, the idea is slowly through 50 to 60 years, it diffuses power like a spiral. So in 1994, after he died, they got rid of the office of presidency and they changed it to the Supreme Presidium's Assembly. So in the DPRK, every cabinet member is elected by popular vote. And the role of the presidency was not given, that used to belong to one person, now is like given to like a whole like committee of 30 people. So, and then the next level in the 2019, they broke up the Supreme Presidium's Assembly to a second body. So now it's been diffused even more. And of course, without the US constantly like occupying half their country and like having nuclear exercises in South Korea, all this, they would have probably diffused the state quicker, but they have what they have. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I do like to mention to everyone, though your listeners know, that I lean anarchist. And so, like, I can understand this. Like, and I don't understand why other anarchists. I don't hang with a lot of anarchist theory anarchists. So, but I mean, I don't understand why they don't get it, because even me getting into this, even as a kid, as like a teenager, the first thing I understood was you couldn't go from A to B. Like I understood there had to be, the withering, and we don't know what the withering could be a year if the whole, if the workers conquered the whole world and had every government under control, we could wither away really fast. But we're not going to be able to do that. I mean, that would be crazy. But
well, like I said, Lenin explains how the yardstick of world history is really big. So 100 years here and there. I mean, eventually this will happen.
Yeah, and the whole thing too is like, it's also like I was thinking about this. It's like everyone's mindset. Like, you can think that you're not. You can say I'm not propagandized. I don't. But still things come up, and so you don't. You don't understand that you've been from birth told like you have to be you have to make money for the capitalists. Like you were born to do this basically under in the United States. So it's really hard to shed all that, and it's scary, and it feels like we're not going to get there because what about these people? Well, then that's why you have community, because community is going to help the people. So you just have to, like, the whole thing is to just like not think of it on the state level. And then when you have a state that is actually working with the people, it's easier not to think of it. It's easier to worry about the stuff that you need to worry about.
Exactly. I mean, having a dictatorship of the proletariat is very different. I've seen it. I haven't been to Vietnam or China, but I've seen people in Vietnam and China, and it allows them a certain kind of, to be a little bit naive in some ways, according to me, but it's very relaxing.
Yeah.
Like, I like anytime somebody gives me information, I'm like nervous, and I'm like, is this true? Is this true? Like, I go fact check. Like a Vietnamese, like when they get this from the government, they're like, oh, it's true. They know it's true. You know what I mean?
Yes. Sorry, I just had to throw the phone in the other room because it was about to.
Okay.
I forgot to shut it off.
Okay. Naive and quite inexperienced people imagine that permissibility of compromise in general is sufficient to obliterate any distinction between opportunism, against which we are waging, and must wage an unremitting struggle, and revolutionary Marxism or communism. But we already did.
You're way down
questions that arise in
during the 1914.
During 1914-1918 imperialist war between two groups of equally predatory countries, Germany and UK, social chauvinism was the principal and the fundamental type of opportunism. That is social patriotism.
Which he puts on Kotsky. Kotsky is he always calls Kotsky a social chauvinist.
Yeah. So, because he was a racist as fuck. Because like the fundamental thing is that whether or not the World War I is basically a war over colonialism, like whether
Mhm.
or not India should be part of Germany or England. And Lenin's was like, no, India should be free.
Yep.
And Kautsky was like compromising with the German opportunists and like agreeing to the war and being a total, yeah.
Yeah.
Our principle and the fundamental defense of country, in which such a war was really equivalent to the defense of predatory interests of one's own bourgeoisie. After the war, the defense of the robber League of Nations, defense of direct and indirect alliances with the bourgeoisie of one's own country against the revolutionary proletariat and the Soviet movement, and the defense of bourgeoisie democracy and bourgeoisie parliamentarism against Soviet power became principal manifestations of those intolerable and treacherous compromises whose sum total constituted an opportunism fatal to the revolutionary proletariat and its cause. So here he's just explaining what right-wing deviationism
Yeah.
is.
I'd also like to bring up robber League of Nations. Like, why did we stop calling rich people robber barons? Like that was how we, like, we don't call our rich people bad names. Like in the United States, like we'll call every other billionaire in the world an oligarch, but you're not in the United States. Like they're not doing no such thing. They have no power here, right? So
Yeah,
we got to bring up more of these
terminologies.
terminologies on them.
We should make an encyclopedia, a word list eventually. Let's do that for next week.
We will, yeah.
It's surprising that all compromise with other parties, any policy of maneuvering and compromise must be emphatically rejected. The German left's right in the Frankfurt pamphlet. It is surprising that with such views, the left do not emphatically condemn Bolshevism. After all, the German left cannot but know that the entire history of Bolshevism, both before and after the October Revolution, is full of instances of changes of tact, conciliatory tactics, and compromises with other parties, including bourgeoisie parties. So here he's describing left-wing deviationism. Okay. To carry on a war for the overthrow of the international bourgeoisie, a war which is 100 times more difficult, protracted, and complex than the most stubborn ordinary wars between states, and to renounce in advance any change of tack or utilization of a conflict of interest, even if temporary among one's enemies, or a conciliation or compromise with possible allies, even if they're temporary, unstable, vacillating, or conditional allies. It is not like the U.S. and England in World War II. It is not ridiculous. Is that not ridiculous in the extreme? Is it not like making a difficult ascent of unexplored and hitherto inaccessible mountain and refusing in advance ever to move in zigzags, ever to retrace one's steps, or even abandon a course once selected and to try others? And yet people so immature and experienced. If your youth were any explanation, it would not be so bad. Young people are preordained to talk such nonsense for a certain period. But then he's talking about people like Kautsky who are old, but then also are talking like this nonsense.
Infantile.
What?
Infantile.
Yeah. That's why he said if youth were the explanation, it would not be so bad because young people grow up to be old. Have met with support, whether direct or indirect, open or covert, whole or partial, it does not matter, from some members of the Communist Party of Holland. After the first socialist revolution of the proletariat and the overthrow of the bourgeoisie in some country, the proletariat of that country remains for a long time weaker than the bourgeoisie, obviously, simply because the latter's extensive international links, and also because spontaneous and continuous regeneration of capitalism and the bourgeoisie by small commodity producers of the country, which has overthrown the bourgeoisie.
I feel like that is the point, like, people need to understand about the state. Like,
yeah,
that is the most important, like, that is how he's describing it right there. If you can understand that, then
yeah, China is a great example where they allowed a little bit of capitalistic relations, but then they were very smart. The West was dumb because they thought, hey, the West was so cocky that they thought we're gonna go coup, haha, we're just gonna go coup China in 5 years or whatever. But yeah. China had seen every Eastern Bloc and then they had taken copious notes, and then they're like, come on here. We're going to dilute your shares every 10 years. And then the West was like, oh, sure, because we're going to coup you. And then we're going to have all your intellectual property and you can go screw yourself. Like, so that's why they're so salty about Xi right now, because that's like the rise of Xi just shows that the West, all those their coup attempts was,
the
West had gambled wrong with China.
Right.
The most powerful enemy can be vanquished only by exerting the utmost effort and by most thoroughly careful, attentive, skillful, and obligatory use of any and even smallest rift between the enemies, any conflict of interest among the bourgeoisie of various countries, and among the various groups or types of bourgeoisie within various countries, and also by taking advantage of any, even the smallest opportunity to win a mass ally, even though this ally is temporary, vacillating, unstable, unreliable, and conditional. Those who do not understand this reveal a future to understand even the smallest grain of Marxism, of modern scientific socialism in general. Those who have not proved in practice over a fairly considerable period of time in fairly varied political situations their ability to apply this truth in practice have not yet learned to help the revolutionary class in its struggle to emancipate all toiling humanity from exploiters. This applies equally to the period before and after the proletariat has won political power. Our theory is not a dogma, but a guide to action, said Marx and Engels. The greatest blunder, the greatest crime committed by such out-and-out Marxists such as Karl Kautsky, Otto Bauer, is that they have not understood this and have unable to apply it at crucial moments of the proletarian revolution. Okay, the political activity is not like the pavement of Nevsky Prospect. So Nevsky Prospect is a big street. I've actually taken pictures. It's like where Catherine. That's where the Lenin Library is that I've taken pictures from.
If you've been there, I wanted to know if you walked that street.
Constantly, it's like it's the biggest street. That's where the library is. So what it is that in other streets in St. Petersburg or Leningrad, whatever you want to call it, the streets are like this. But Nevsky Prospect is in the middle, and it's like this.
Yeah. There was another thing I wanted to say that I in looking in with the other piece that we're thinking of doing is this reminded me of that there's a point where Marx talking about I can't remember who he's talking about in the other piece, but he says if they're saying that they're Marxist, then I'm not a Marxist like Marx is. And that's what it felt like here, like they're claiming that they're Marxists, but they're not Marxists. Like it wasn't Kautsky because Kautsky was later than Marx, but so it was something during Marxist time. I think it might have even been like the Blanqui, like someone that was.
Or it could have been Proudhon. Marx was like, or the German.
Proudhon was earlier, so yeah, it was not the anarchists. It was definitely someone that claimed that.
Was it the German philosophers?
Yeah, I think it was Germans.
Okay, because the German philosophers, they're kind of like the Jordan. They're literally like, I'm not kidding. They remind me a lot of Jordan Peterson, and they call themselves the young Hegelians. And Marx is really, and Engels is actually even worse. Engels is even more ruthless against them.
Yeah. So, all right. So you're after this.
Political activity is not like the pavement of Nevsky Prospect. Lenin already explains it. The well-kept, broad, level pavement that is perfectly straight, principal thoroughfare of St. Petersburg. N.G. Chernyshevsky, the great Russian socialist of the pre-Marxist period, used to say, since Chernyshevsky's time, disregard or forgetfulness of this truth has cost revolutionaries countless sacrifices. We must strive at all costs to prevent the left communist and Western European and American revolutionaries who are devoted to the working class from paying as dearly as the backwards Russians did to learn this truth. The Tsarist just was like merciless. He just went boom, boom, boom. He just knocked lots of people down. Prior to the downfall of Tsarism, the Russian Revolutionary Social Democrat made repeated use of the services of the bourgeoisie liberals. They concluded numerous practical compromises with the latter. In 1901, 1902, even prior to the appearance of Bolshevism, the old editorial board of Iskra, which consists of Plekhanov, Axelrad, Zasulich, Martov, Patrasov, and myself, concluded, not for long, it is true, a formal political alliance with Struve, the political leader of bourgeoisie liberalism, while at the same time being able to wage an unremitting and most merciless ideological and political struggle against bourgeoisie liberalism and the slightest manifestation of its influence in the working class movement. The Bolsheviks have always adhered to this policy. Since 1905, they have systematically advocated for an alliance between the working class and the peasantry against the liberal bourgeoisie and Tsarism. Never, however, refusing to support the bourgeoisie against Tsarism, for instance, during the second round elections or during second ballots, and never ceasing their relentless and ideological and political struggle against the socialist revolutionaries. The socialist revolutionaries were kind of like were the future of, was what the Narodniks became, and the Narodniks were the ones who wanted to have like deed as a act of revolution. So their idea is they go assassinate random government officials as a way to
propaganda of the deed.
Yeah, that's it. Propaganda.
Of the deed is that, I mean, there's nonviolent stuff under that, but it's
okay. This is a stupid manifestation.
It's okay to go for one person to go and assassinate someone because that person, if it's a capitalist or a czar or someone like that, is hurting.
But then that usually ended up like what happened with Gavril Princip. They started World War I. Yeah. Like it does not. It actually. Yeah, go ahead.
The Blanqui, like that's what he wanted to do, a little coup, and then that was supposed to be like, so what basically Lenin is saying, like, okay, these little, like, if you had just a nihilist going in and killing someone, that's not the people. You have to have the people behind it all. You know what I mean?
Yeah, like, I mean, you can have a propaganda of the deed as they did in India with the salt marches or the spinning wheels. Yeah. But that was more like the salt marches was when they walked 1,000 miles to the seaside and just got some salt and then got arrested. That was just to show what kind of bastards the British were. Like, what the hell? We can't even get our own salt from the sea. We have to buy British salt for like 10 billion pounds.
Yeah.
So that was a propaganda of the deed that was effective because it helped people learn something new that they would not have ordinarily learned.
Yes. Like some protests and stuff can definitely be like a propaganda of the deed, but it's also the group of people that are doing it. If you're a bigger group of people, if you're just like one person or a little, like that's what Blanqui wanted, was just like say 10 people, because you didn't want everyone to know, because you didn't want it to get out and you get caught, and you can look at what the Narodniks did, and they would get caught because there was
it's okay to get caught because there are millions of you. In order to get anything effective, you need the entire country of India or the entire country of Russia.
Yeah, behind
that's it, right?
Yeah. So it's like trying to be. What he's saying is trying to be tricky with a small group is not as effective as having all the people behind you, and not try to be this, do this little tricky thing.
Yeah, like having all the people behind you can be very useful. Like I said, propaganda of the deed, when done properly, carefully, thoughtfully, can show a lot. But it has to be done in the right manner and whatnot. And so the socialist revolutionaries wanted to do that, where they would go assassinate random people, and it usually ended up with the Tsar would crack down on everyone and just like murder the entire village. And and then the Narodniks were also creepy in that they were city folks, like highly educated city folks, and they would go and wear like peasant garb and like really creep out the peasants. It's almost like this kind of. Imagine if somebody who was educated at Harvard were to just like wear a cowboy hat and boots and just go be like, I'm gonna go talk to a farmer in Texas. Like, that's gonna be off-putting and creepy to the farmer in Texas, right?
Yes.
So that's kind of what they did. So that's why they had to kind of push them aside. Between 1903 and 1912, there are periods of several years where we were formally united with the Mensheviks in a single social democratic party, but we never stopped our ideological and political struggle against them as opportunists and vehicles of bourgeoisie influence on the proletariat. So the basic Bolshevik-Menshevik split is that Marx believed that when you had a lot of proletarians coming together in a highly industrialized society, they can just like they just need to take over like the building where the bourgeoisie are, and it'll be the easiest thing. In theory, Marx is right, but somehow it's much easier to take over like the entire, like all the farms across 2 continents, like in Russia or China, than it is to do what Marx theorized. But the Mensheviks were like, yeah, we can't really have a revolution yet in Russia because we need to industrialize. But then Lenin, when he wrote Imperialism, the highest stage of capitalism, he explained that the West will never let Russia industrialize because Russia's role is to be a third world country. So you can't wait for that because that'll never happen. You see?
And that's one of the reasons why Lenin wanted to prove the Narodniks wrong, because the Narodniks were saying that there was no capitalism happening in Russia at the time, and they wanted to stop it before capitalism happened. But they had the imperial,
it was already there.
The colonial capitalism, right?
So exactly.
So there was capitalism. So Lenin needed to prove that point of it, because then the revolution can happen, because you kind of had to be like for some reason there had to be like this, Marx is like, you have to kind of go through capitalism before you can get.
So exactly. So sorry, I have to get some tea because I'm just getting thirsty. So basically the and this is also a good example of right-wing deviation and left-wing deviation. The Mensheviks were like the Mensheviks were like, we'll wait with midst of opportunity, like how Bain says. They were like, oh, we have to wait till Russia industrializes. And as you can see with countries that are not Russia, that are in the third world, like every country in Africa, India, 100 years later, they'll never industrialize because that is not their role under world capitalism.
Nope. That's not, that's not what the capitalists need them to do.
Yeah. So they'll never, and so that was the Mensheviks thing. So the Mensheviks, I mean, and ultimately you realize that the Mensheviks didn't really want a revolution. They kind of wanted to feel good about themselves.
Well, I mean, it's the same that you take the liberals in the United States. Like they sit there like like a lot of, I don't want to put down the DSA because I know people that are in the DSA, and some DSAs, like, you work in the.
I mean, there are much easier targets.
But like the higher up is kind of liberal, you know what I mean? And then it's like, oh, but we should like kind of go along to get along, you know what I mean? Like it's always like that sense, like, we're doing okay enough, so like why push it? Like why make it worse? Why not be a little bit civil and do it in this very civil way, and we'll just end up going that way and taking over the capitalism.
Yeah, you can't. I mean, like, okay, and if it's not, you cannot take over. And as like twice Bernie tried, and as we know, Lenin's right. If it does not have a Marxist, Leninist, democratic, centralist structure, the organization cannot be taken over because it's not designed to accept the popular will. So, yeah, the DSA's idea of taking over the Democratic Party is impossible because there are really no rules for like, look at the fake Iowa election. Remember the fake Iowa elections where they had this creepy, shady app?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's just not possible, as we can tell twice. They just change the rules whenever it fits them. So, so Lenin's always right, once you realize. But yeah, in the U.S. government, in many people are like, in the beginning, they're like, I'm socialist. I'm the socialist mayor of some random town. Well, not Bernie. I'm not talking about Bernie's actually. Was actually a really good mayor. Vermont. He's different. Even though he's a social democrat, he was very good mayor of Burlington.
And it is. It's the conditions too. Like, so you have to look at.
He was lucky that it's Vermont. Vermont is like one of the more.
He was able to do that in Vermont, but to try to bring it to the rest of the United States, well, it's
a harder task. It didn't scale.
Much harder because they've made us believe. For one thing, like a lot of people were like, I really like Bernie, but I don't want to vote for him because, we got this guy Trump, like.
Oh my God. It was the way I canvassed, and I was all over I went to every state. Like, I worked very hard.
Yeah, you did.
Thank you. I would walk 13 miles a day, every day. But I had so many people, like, and then I had to explain the electability thing. Like, it was hard work. And half of them were convinced that Bernie was not electable, which is like catch-22. It's like, of course he's not electable if you don't elect him, right?
I know, like that was the thing. It's like it's the whole thing, like with the third party, because I voted third party because I just believe, okay, we need to, get rid of the duopoly. Like, so what can I do to do that? The minimum I can do is vote third party, right? So I go and vote third party since the 90s, and everyone's like, oh, you can't do that because they're never going to win. Well, yeah, they're not going to win because if you're not voting for it, and especially like I'm in Massachusetts, like we might get our Republican governors, but they're all just centrists. We only vote centrists. Like we're not going to have
ultimately the dumbest excuse, like the dumbest, shittiest excuses they give is ultimately because they're happy with status. You have to remember, like you have to understand when it's somebody who has a real concern versus a dumb, stupid excuse because they're happy with status quo.
Yeah.
Because people who are happy with status quo still want to feel good about themselves and not feel like they're horrible and counter-revolutionary. So they'll always say it's a good idea in theory, blah, blah, blah. But the hardest part of canvassing is trying to distinguish between the opportunists, like the people who are actually comfortable with status quo, who are not telling you the truth, versus people with actual concerns.
I'm just reading through some of the comments. So they're, let's see. What are we saying up here? They were hoodwinked by propaganda such as Holodomor. The Marshall Plan had capitalist motives. World War I was industrial versus finance. Capitalism, which is
World War I was basically a war for colonies. So that's why So if you read my article about Pavlov's house. This little 4-story house in Stalingrad stood longer than almost every bloody European country in World War II. But in World War I, they were all fighting really hard because the war was whether Germany could have Senegal, Ethiopia, whatever France had in Africa versus whatever England had in Africa, and Vietnam and India. So that's why in World War I, all these bloody countries fought much harder because it was for colonial exploitation.
Yeah, I would say World War I was industrial versus finance capitalism.
No, it was for colonial exploitation and who gets to exploit all their colonies.
Yeah, I think it was much more on the imperialism, like the colonialism.
Yeah, and that's why all these bloody European countries fought so much harder in World War I, and then they're just lasted 12 days. Like Denmark lasted 6 hours.
Yeah. So I mean, it could have been a little bit at home, like in the United States, the industrial versus finance.
Because not really, because they were not competing. The finance capital enables imperialism, and industrial capital needs raw material. So they were hand in hand.
True. Yeah, so they need each other. So yeah. And Brighton's thoughts is glad that we're at no compromises because we haven't reached his favorite chapter, which can only be one of 2 left. So
Okay.
All right, so why don't we still got a little bit to go here, so let's get on with it.
Prior to the downfall of Tsarism, by the way, please donate. Also hit like, subscribe, click on the bell, and donate super chats.
Yes, please.
Okay. Prior to the downfall of Tsarism, the Russian Revolutionary Social Democrat made repeated use of the services of the bourgeois. Oh wait, no. We got it. Where am I? I don't even know.
Never ceasing.
Prior to the doom. Oh no.
No, you were midway into that. Like the Bolsheviks have always adhered to this policy since 1905.
Okay, since 1905, they have systematically advocated an alliance between the working class and the peasantry against the liberal. Okay, we got to the Menshevik. The bourgeoisie Revolutionary Peasant Party exposing them as petty bourgeoisie Democrats who have falsely described themselves as socialists. During the Duma elections of 1907, the Bolsheviks entered briefly into a formal political bloc with the Socialist Revolutionaries. Between 1902 and 1912, there were periods of several years in which we were formally united with the Mensheviks in a single social democratic party, but we never stopped our ideological and political struggle against them as opportunists and vehicles of the bourgeoisie influence on the proletariat. During the war, we concluded certain compromises with the Kautskyites, the left Mensheviks, Martov, and with a section of the socialist revolutionaries, Chernow and Natanson. We were together with them at Zimmerwald, which is a city in Switzerland, and Kienthal, and issued joint manifestos.
Those are both conferences, actually.
Yeah.
The Zimmerwald and the Kienthal.
Yeah, but those are also cities, and one of them is
yeah. But he's referring to the conferences. Yeah.
However, we never ceased and never relaxed our ideological and political struggle against the Kautskyites, Martov, Chernov. When Natanson died in 1919 during a revolutionary communist Narodnik, he was very close to and almost in agreement with us. That's the best way. That's the best thing you can do to your enemy, is turn him into your friend.
Yeah.
At the very moment of the October Revolution, we entered into an informal but very important and very successful political bloc with the petty bourgeoisie peasantry by adopting the social revolutionary agrarian program in its entirety without an alteration. We effected an undeniable compromise in order to prove to the peasants that we wanted not to steamroll them, but to reach with an agreement with them. And the really funny thing is that the social realist revolutionaries cried for years about how the Bolsheviks plagiarized us, and then the Bolsheviks were like, ha ha ha, but you needed us to implement your stupid program.
Yeah.
Yeah, they cried for years about how the Bolsheviks stole their program, and then yeah.
Well, I feel so. This is what I think. Like the more, like, it's been what, 2 years that I've been doing this with you, and one thing that I'm noticing is, like, it's almost like, okay, the Bolsheviks won, right?
Yeah.
The Bolsheviks are the ones that won, and then everyone comes in after and is like, okay. Then they're like, oh, but we should do this. Like, we thought this, like the Mensheviks thought this way. Oh, but now we should go turn this way. No, you don't get a say now. Your method didn't win.
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm saying? So, I mean, I get the whole thing, like, oh, the winners, but like when you have, like, you said their enemies, like the Narodniks were his enemy. They weren't so much his enemies. They were against him in certain ways, but what he's saying is, like, even some of them can turn their head and figure it out. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and a lot of people did.
Yeah.
Even what's his name? Macno. Okay, after he got steamrolled with with the stupid place in Kronstadt,
Yeah.
he came back. He exiled in France. Then the minute he saw Mussolini, he was like, oh fuck. This is what Lenin was talking about. And then he agreed that Lenin was right, started something called platformism, which is very similar to what is to be done. But it's like a little different in that it caters to people with anarchist thinking a little bit more with Malatesta. Because both of them saw Mussolini in the horror, and they were like, oh, we were unprepared. So both of them acknowledged that they were wrong with trying to leapfrog into anarchism. And yeah.
I feel like people, okay, so, like, you take the Paris Commune, people wrote, okay, so you had Marx and Engels and even Lenin, like, everyone wrote their thing about the Paris Commune, Kropotkin, all of them. They were like, oh, this is what happened, this is what was wrong. It was like looking at it in aftermath. It was like writing the history of it from the people's point of view. Mm-hmm. And so the same thing was happening with the Bolshevik revolution, but so many people nowadays are tagging into the people that were saying, okay, this is what I think was probably wrong, or this is what should have been different with the Bolsheviks. Mm-hmm. And they're saying, like, they're tagging on that, like, see, it was wrong. But no, the Bolsheviks won. So
literally, there has not been a revolution that is not Marxist-Leninist.
Yeah, and then look at like, okay, so the aftermath. They're just saying, like, these are some things that we should look at. These are what we should. But a lot of this stuff is not like saying Lenin did everything wrong. Like, but that's what people nowadays want you to believe.
Nowadays in the West.
Yeah, that, like, when Rosa, like, wrote her thing, or like, when they wrote, like, the thing, like, reflecting what happened.
You should understand the historical context in which they wrote. I mean, with Emma Goldman, she kind of sucked, and she was really literally funded by.
I know you hate her, but she just Emma and her, like, you gotta. I think that was.
She was also a eugenicist. You know that she was part of the eugenicist movement.
Yeah, I mean, it's no, she wasn't part of it.
Yes, she was. I can show you the exact literature. like the eugenicist movement advertised in her magazine. And let me just show it to you. Like I tweeted this out. I don't say things
Oh, I
without
know what you're
actually
talking
doing
about.
it.
No, that was like prior to it. Like she wasn't really in it at that time. Like when she was pushing the
Eugenicists found her.
same
Okay,
way.
let's talk about this later.
Okay.
I mean, she was also pretty racist, but that's another story.
Well, I mean, she is what
And she was funded by J.P. Morgan Chase to write shit against the Bolsheviks at the end of her life.
Yeah, I don't know much about the end of her life. I didn't really.
Okay, basically, after she came back, after she left Russia, J.P. Morgan like bought her a big house somewhere in Europe, and she was basically funded by J.P. Morgan to write really stupid shit
I
about
wouldn't
the
doubt it.
Bolshevik Revolution.
A lot of them kind of, yeah.
Okay. I forgot.
Maybe you are.
Okay. Therefore, it is understandable why the attacks made by the German left against the Central Committee of the Communist Party for Germany for entertaining the idea of the bloc with the Independent Social Democratic Party of Germany, the Kautskytes, are absolutely innate, in our opinion, and clear proof that the lefts are in the wrong. In Russia, too, there were right Mensheviks, participants in the Kerensky government, who corresponded to the German Schneidermans, left Mensheviks, Martov, corresponded to the German Kautskytes, and standing in opposition to the right Mensheviks. A gradual shift of the worker masses from the Mensheviks over to the Bolsheviks was clearly seen in 1917. At the first All-Russia Conference of the Soviets, held in June 1917, we only had 13% of the votes. The Social Revolutionaries and Mensheviks had a majority. At the Second Congress of the Soviets, October 25th, 1917, Old Style, and November 7th, 1917, New Style, we had 51% of the votes. Why is it that in Germany, the same and absolutely identical shift from right to left did not immediately strengthen the German communists, but first strengthened the Midway Independent Party, although the latter never had independent political ideas or independent policy, but merely wavered between the Schneidermans and the communists? One of the evident reasons was the erroneous tactic of the German communists, who must fearlessly and honestly admit this error and learn to rectify it. The error consisted in their denial of the need to take part in the reactionary bourgeoisie parliaments and in the reactionary trade unions. The error consisted in numerous manifestations of that left-wing infantile disorder, which now has come to the surface and will consequently be cured the more thoroughly and more rapidly with greater advantage to the organism. The German Independent Social Democratic Party is obviously not a homogeneous body. Alongside the old opportunist leaders, Kautsky, Hilferding, and apparently even to a considerable extent Crispian, Ledebor, and others, have revealed their inability to understand the significance of Soviet power and the dictatorship of the proletariat, and their inability to lead the proletariat's revolutionary struggle, there has emerged in this party a left and proletarian wing which is growing most rapidly. Hundreds of thousands of members of this party, which has, I think, a membership of some 750,000, are proletarians who are abandoning the Schneidermen and rapidly going over to communism. This proletarian wing has already proposed at the Leipzig Congress of the Independents 1919 immediately an unconditional affiliation to the Third International. To fear a compromise with this wing of the party is positively ridiculous. On the contrary, it is the duty of communists to seek and find a findable form of compromise with them. A compromise which, on the one hand, will facilitate and accelerate the necessary complete fusion with this wing, and on the other, will in no way hamper the communists in their ideological and political struggle against the opportunistic right wing of the independents. It will probably not be no easy matter to devise this suitable form of compromise. But only a charlatan could promise German workers and German communists an easy road to victory.
Yeah. So the Scheidermans that was like the first part of the Weimar Republic, right?
Yeah.
And so what were they? Were they like sent? I know he ends up he protests the Treaty of Versailles, but what were they like? More like rebels, or were they?
They were okay. So Schneiderman's I don't know. Okay, so they were like they were not. They were okay. They did not. Okay. So the reason why they did not like the Treaty of Versailles was not because it was a psychotic treaty, but more like Germany didn't. There was this Sen Scheigerman world, um, the Sen Shermans. I don't know how to pronounce this. Okay, I can share it to you. But basically, they yeah, they kind of didn't like the Treaty of Versailles, not because of it's like imperialist, but mostly because they thought Germany got the raw deal. I mean, they're right, but because they had that mind of Germany getting the wrong raw deal, they didn't ally themselves with the world proletariat, which would have been far more useful in their fight against what the horror that came after. If that makes
Yeah.
sense, right? And that's a mistake that Spain did too. The Spanish anarchists did not align themselves with the colonized people in Morocco, and Franco literally invaded from Morocco. And if they had aligned themselves and thought about the anti-imperialist struggle quicker, he could have been stopped in Morocco. Like,
Yeah.
there's no way he would have gotten to Spain.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. All right.
If that makes sense.
Yes, it does.
Okay. Sorry. Yeah, that was and capitalism would not be capitalism if the proletariat, pur sang, which means pure blood, were not surrounded by a large number of exceedingly motley types intermediate between proletarian and semi-proletarian, who earns his livelihood in part by sale of his labor power. So a semi-proletarian was happening to the small farmers back then when the big agro companies would take over. Is that like a lot of them you could like they back in the day they could have just tilled their little land and have enough food, but then like when the big agro took over, like whatever they did, they would get undercut. So they didn't like boom just abandon and move to the cities. What would happen is that the dad would quit. The dad would be like, okay, let me go get a job at the factory like 3 days a week, and you guys take over the farm.
Basically what.
And then what?
Oh, that's basically what like my family up in Canada. What happened is like the factory came in, wanted their farmland, so then they ended up doing farming for the factory.
Exactly.
Like they had their own factory, but then they kind of gotten overtaken and had to to make any money, they had to go this way.
Exactly. So eventually all of the people will lose their farmland and will be forced to like work in the factories like slaves. But there is that period when these people had small farms that worked before the big agro industry took over.
Mm-hmm.
So those are what he means by semi-proletarian. The semi-proletarian and the small peasant, a petty artisan, handicraft worker, and small master in general. So the artisans, they were just like ruined immediately. The minute you have a factory spitting out like 10,000 clay pots.
Think of AI art now. You know what I mean? Like the artists are like, AI art is bad for us. like we, now we're not going to have the jobs to illustrate books or something like that because now people are just using the AI art. So it's like,
After Effects. Like before, what would happen is like in Disney, they'd have master frames. So like the master artist would draw like at 1 minute, at 0 minutes, and then the next frame he would draw would be like Cinderella at 2 minutes. And little like they had 10,000 illustrators who would draw each frame by hand. Get that transition.
Yep.
But now I can do that in like 30 seconds using Adobe Illustrator.
Oh yeah, I can make my own little car. Like I can make something move and all that. It's like
I mean, like I can do like one Cinderella. Like it'll take me 30 seconds After Effects. Sorry, not Ella. So that's like that's another example.
I also felt like in reading this part, like I was thinking of like how there's always that nurses and teachers aren't part of the proletariat, but like
of course they are. If you
they are.
Nothing to sell but your labor, you are proletarian.
Yeah.
You might make more than say a factory worker, but you're still selling your labor. I mean, even like majority of doctors in America, they are under so much debt that even if they get like $500,000, what happens is that 1/3 of their salary goes for malpractice insurance, and then another third goes for debt relief, and then often they are living just a few paychecks away from destitution. So
exactly.
Even if it looks like in the beginning that they're making shitloads of money, a lot of them are just that far away from destitution. The small peasant and the middle peasant, and so on. If the proletariat itself were not divided into more developed and less developed strata, if it were not divided according to territorial origin, trade, sometimes according to religion, and so on. From all this follows the necessity, the absolute necessity for the Communist Party, the vanguard of the proletariat, its class conscious section, to resort to changes of tack, to conciliation and compromises with various groups of proletarians, with various parties of the workers and small masters. It is entirely a matter of knowing how to apply these tactics in order to raise and not lower the general level of the proletarian class consciousness, revolutionary spirit, and ability to fight and win. So
I'm
a
gonna.
good example is the how like Democrats are like that guy in Texas is racist. You're like, shut up. The idea is
I want to say here, like, you know how I always say, like, okay, I lean towards anarchism because I felt like it spoke with me. It spoke to me, especially after I could no longer work and I was disabled. But in what he's saying right there, like, that is what he's saying. Like, okay, we talk about the worker, but like we're talking about all the groups. We're talking about, and it's the same kind of thing. Like yeah, I mean, communism is always like to the proletariat, but you are talking about like domestic workers. You are talking about, people that are disabled and not able to, work as much and stuff like that. Like it is there. And it's in the nuance that it's there, but it is there. So, just so people understand that it's not just, if you can't work, they're not overlooking you,
no. The idea is yeah, I mean, if you can't work, they're not overlooking you. It's just that back in his day, you probably died if you couldn't work in Tsarist Russia and you were that poor. You know what I mean?
Yeah, she probably didn't have a lot of disabled people living.
Yeah, yeah. Like actually,
you had a lot of disabled people.
What?
You had a lot of disabled people, but they were working. They had to work. So
yeah. I mean, but a good example of a lot of this is Soviet Union right after World War II. You got millions of like every kind of disability because a lot of them were survivors of
they
they had the worst.
Like they worked themselves to death instead of having like the safety net of, you know, not having, now that we
Yeah,
have Social Security here, like you're able, if you cannot do the capitalist jobs, because I am an able person, I'm able to do stuff, but I have to go by disability, like I have to be called disabled. But I caregive, I do other things, but it doesn't fall under the mode of capitalism that I'm being exploited to make money off of. So they don't really
yeah.
care.
But I mean, like I said, there are a lot of different things that, but like I said, back then it probably just meant they died.
Yeah, yeah.
The life expectancy back then was like 32, as in half the people were at 32.
Like nothing, yeah. Especially,
what do you say?
Especially among the workers, like your life expectancy is really low.
I don't know how much it was among the workers versus everyone, but I just know all of Tsarist Russia had a life expectancy. So half the people died before 32 and half the people lived past 32.
Yeah. Yep.
Incidentally, it should be noted that the Bolshevik victories over the Mensheviks called for the applications of tactics of changes of tack, conciliation, compromises, not only but before, but also after the October Revolution. But the changes of tack and compromise were, of course, such as assisted, boosted, and consolidated the Bolsheviks at the expense of the Mensheviks. Petty bourgeoisie Democrats, including the Mensheviks, inevitably vacillate between the bourgeoisie and the proletariat, between bourgeoisie democracy and Soviet system, between reformism and revolutionaryism, between the love of the worker and the fear of the proletarian dictatorship. That liberals' biggest fear is actually the workers. The communist proper tactics should consist of utilizing these vacillations and not ignoring them. Utilizing them calls for concessions to the elements that are turning towards the proletariat, whenever in the measure that they turn towards the proletariat, in addition to fighting those who turn towards the bourgeoisie. Like, for example, what's his face? Thomas Massey is against the war in Ukraine. He's kind of nut job. He's libertarians always are like really over the top ridiculous. Like I don't know how to explain it, but they really come off as loony binny, right?
Yeah.
I don't know why they come off extra loony, except they do. But when Thomas Massey is like, no Ukraine war, and he's voting to not fund Ukraine, I will be boosting him a little bit because he's turning towards
Yeah.
he's doing what's good for everyone, even though
Yeah,
he has the most insane reasons for it. I don't care.
like Mike Lee's against the war in Yemen, so you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah. Bernie
you know,
Sanders worked with Mike Lee to do a thing, and then 10 fucking Vichy Democrats decided to defect.
yeah. Yep.
Yeah, like there was like 4 Republicans, so if all the Democrats had voted the way that with their party, there would have been But it's always like, isn't it funny how you always find the right number of Democrats
They
defecting?
always have the correct number.
They're always
And I know they say, okay, you know, they love pointing out that it was me. This is why I know that a lot of these liberals do not pay attention to politics at all, because it isn't just Manchin and Sinema that are these rotating.
No, it's the constantly rotating villain.
There's a whole there's like at
when there
least
was
1,000
mention, they'll find, like I said, for this Yemen vote that I'm talking about, they found 5 Republicans. So Manchin defecting would not have been enough. They found like 10 Democrats somehow.
It's like Durbin, Coons, like there's always they're the blue dogs.
There's always the right number of Democrats that defect in order to balance out any Republicans who decide to vote the right way.
Yep, that's what they do.
It's magical. Like, yeah. One thing that really pisses me off. Like, so for the first Gulf War, the Democrats had both houses, right?
Yes.
And you know that the Speaker of the House can decide to like whether to bring a bill to floor or not to bring a bill to floor, right?
Exactly.
So if it's for Gulf War, Dick Gephardt could have just like eaten the bill and nothing would like boom, the end. No, he brought it to floor just so that we could have the right number. He voted against the Gulf War, but he fucking brought it to floor so that the right number of Democrats could defect to balance out the Ron. I think back then it was Ron Paul, right? Rand Paul's father.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
I
think balance out Ron Paul. And so there was a few more. There were quite a few more. So then what you get is like just the right number of. And Dick Gephardt could have just not brought that bill to floor at all if he wanted to.
Oh, yeah. No, they didn't need to.
They didn't need to, but they did because of the incubator babies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But now presidents don't have to go to war. They don't need the Congress to allow them to go to war. So it doesn't matter.
Now, after 9/11, all those bets were off, but back then it was different.
Yes, true. So.
Okay. I forgot where I
was. The common proper tactics. So Menshevism began to disintegrate.
Okay, as a result of the application of correct tactics, Menshevism began to disintegrate and has been disintegrating more and more in our country. The stubbornly opportunist political leaders are being isolated, and the best of the workers and the best elements among the petty bourgeoisie Democrats are being brought into our camp. This is a lengthy process, a hasty decision. No compromises, no maneuvers can only prejudice the strengthening of the revolutionary proletariat's influence and enlargement of its forces. Lastly, one of the undoubted errors of the German left lies in their downright refusal to recognize the Treaty of Versailles. Yeah, the Treaty of Versailles is one of the most shittiest treaties on earth because what it is basically England, America, and France, the allies, as it's always these allies, getting together and be like, hey, Germany is like knows how to do industry better than us. So we have to kneecap them because we can't really handle the free market when people are actually, when people sell better stuff, like we can't really compete in this. So we need to kneecap them. So if you understand the Treaty of Versailles from like 3 competitors deciding to kneecap somebody who is better than them in actually manufacturing, everything makes sense, right?
Yeah.
And that was, so it is a shitty treaty. What they did with Hungary is literally 60% of the ethnic Hungarians were like put outside of Hungary because they were afraid of Bela Kun. And that was shitty because imagine you can't go visit your uncle anymore or whatever. They gave they cut, like they did the same thing with Germany. They just they created Romania out of thin air.
Yeah.
Austria was like they created Czechoslovakia was kind of a BS country. Sorry. And that's why you don't have a lot of patriotism in Europe, is because you can't really feel patriotic towards fake countries created by the West everywhere, right?
Yeah, and it's changing. Well, that is the whole thing. Like, so all right, so I would go back to my French Canadian family and where they are from in France. I'm now Belgium, not French. Like
Yeah,
as my ancestry, like I'm
yeah.
actually.
It's
At
so
first
stupid.
point, I think I was German. I don't know how it works,
They
but
gave like, yeah, they just like basically they cut the best industrial areas from Germany and gave it to France, so that the Ruhr Valley, which is where they had mines. So it is literally the Allies deciding, hey, we can't, like they're doing that with China too. We can't handle the free market anymore. We genocide. That's exactly. I mean, no, it's a little different. Okay. So with Germany, that's what they did in the first Treaty of Versailles, is where they could not. So that's why they just cut off the Ruhr Valley and just like gave it to France.
yeah,
And then they like redistributed Germany's colonies to Belgium. Like,
yeah.
come on.
Mhm.
Yeah, so the Treaty of Versailles was one of the shittiest treaties that led to like, and they like also balkanized Russia. Poland is a totally fake country where they armed this like psychopath Pilsudski. So yes, the Treaty of Versailles was shitty, but that doesn't mean you can pretend that these borders have not changed and that there aren't actual border security forces like with guns enforcing them. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So you can work towards a better borders in the future, as in like, yeah, people should be reunited with their families. We shouldn't have
Oh
fake countries
yeah.
created by the West.
Yeah, I mean that is like one of like that is where we could get like we can't get there until we go through all this other stuff though. Like you can't end borders just because now it's a socialist country, because now you're going to be
US is going to come in. You need to keep America out.
yeah. So I mean, until we get and then you can create these, like you can do it by however you want, like you can
Yeah,
live in a community, with your family. You can live in a community of like-minded people. You can live in, but you could do that, but you can't do that from
like that.
you can't go from here to this. We
Yeah, you
can't.
can't go from US border patrol with like guns like this to borderless society like that. You need a big transition.
I think I'm gonna have
Okay.
to.
What?
Oh, I think we're getting spammed by a.
You have to kick them out. Yes, we have to kick them out. I don't know how to kick them out.
I don't know. I just put them on a timeout.
Yeah, just do that.
Okay.
Okay. Is that a porn scam?
It was a porn scam.
Spam. Sorry. Yeah.
Spam. Yeah.
Whatever. 90%. Lots of times, porn is also a scam too, and spam.
Yeah.
Okay. Lastly, one of the undoubted errors of the German left lies in their downright refusal to recognize the Treaty of Versailles. The more weightily and pompously and more emphatically and peremptorily this viewpoint is formulated by K. Horner, that is Panic. How do you pronounce his name, please?
Who?
Panic. K. Horner's real name.
Oh, Panicoic.
Panicoic. Anton Panicoic.
Yes.
For instance, the less sense it seems to make. It's not enough under the present conditions of the international proletarian revolution to repudiate the preposterous absurdities of national Bolshevism, Laufenberg and others, which has gone to the length of advocating a bloc with the German bourgeoisie for a war against the Entente. I forgot, what side is the Entente in World War One?
Who? I'm sorry. I'm like lost in where you're reading.
In World War One, there are two sides. One side is called the Entente. Which side is that? Is that the France, Germany, England side, or the Germany, Austria, Turkey side?
Entente, Triple Entente, World War One was
Austria, Germany, and
Austria, Hungary. Yeah.
Okay.
So it was the Allies and the Entente. Is that it?
Okay. So Austria, Hungary, Germany, and Turkey. That's the Entente. Okay.
Okay.
Ottoman Empire, Turkey, whatever you want to call it. Okay. One must realize that it is utterly false tactics to refuse to admit that a Soviet Germany, if a German Soviet Republic were to soon to arise, would have to recognize the Treaty of Versailles for a time and to submit to it. Yeah. Even if the Soviet, they couldn't just like pretend that like, oh, Ruhr Valley is ours. They just get grabbed that, right?
Yeah.
Without creating a new world war. And it's not, world wars are not good for proletarians usually.
No. Nope. Not at all.
Millions die. Okay. From this, it does not follow that the independence, at a time when the Schneidermans were in government, when the Soviet government in Hungary had not yet been overthrown, when was still possible for a Soviet revolution in Vienna would support Soviet Hungary, were right under the circumstances in putting forward the demand that the Treaty of Versailles should be signed. At that time, the independents tacked and maneuvered very clumsily for more or less accepted responsibility for the Schneiderman traitors, and more or less backslid from the advocacy of the ruthless and most calmly conducted class war against the Schneidermans to an advocacy of a classless and above-class standpoint. In the present situation, however, the German communists should obviously not deprive themselves of freedom of action by giving a positive categorical promise to repudiate the Treaty of Versailles in the event of communism's victory. That would be absurd. They should say the Schneidermans and the Kotskiets have committed a number of acts of treachery, hindering and in part quite ruining the chances of an alliance with Soviet Russia and Soviet Hungary. We communists will do all we can to facilitate and pave the way for such an alliance. However, we are in no way obligated to repudiate the Treaty of Versailles, come what may, or to do so at once. The possibility of a successful repudiation will depend not only on the German, but also on the international successes of the Soviet Union, Soviet movement. Sorry. So yeah, because in order to repudiate that, you basically need to create a second League of Soviet nations and have their military like stand on that border when you're taking back Ruhr Valley or whatever, right?
Yeah.
And it can't be done without that. And so yeah.
Exactly.
And I mean, like for example, Russia. I've listened to enough Sergei Lavrov's speeches where I know that, you know how Merkel talked about the Minsk Minsk protocol. Is that Minsk protocols or Minsk agreements?
The Minsk agreements, I thought, but
okay, the Minsk agreements buying Ukraine time to build weapons. Well, Sergei Lavrov was not dumb about that. He knew what was going on, but he also knew that it'll take about 8 years for him to go talk to all these other countries like India, China, and Latin, like all these other countries, in order to like be able to successfully skirt the sanctions. Like if it were not for Lavrov's like brilliance in planning, like Russia would not have been able to skirt all the sanctions like they did. Like they made the sanctions. He just made the it's kind of like Magneto did. Like he made the sanctions backfire, but it would not. If Russia had gone to war in 2014, they would not have been able to do that, and they would have lost the war. So it's kind of like that. They didn't. That's why they had to wait until they basically had to wait until 2021 when they finally went to negotiate the Minsk. They repudiated only when like Antony Blinken was caught red-handed sending weapons during the negotiations with Russia.
Yeah, and that's when so like it wasn't really Putin that did it. It was the Duma, right? That
they twisted it. I mean, Putin's never vetoed a bill in the Duma, but the United Russia, which is Putin's party, and the Communist Party united together to like make them recognize Lugansk Republic and Donetsk Republic. And I forgot why, but once you recognize that, these treaties came into effect where Russia had to go and invade.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it's kind of like putting the money where your mouth is. No, whatever it is. It's like if you make that, if United States will, claim like if United States came out, because United States said Taiwan's part of China, right? But if United States in the Congress made a bill and said Taiwan is not part of China, like they'd have to kind of put their money where their mouth is because they now made a stand.
Exactly. Something like that.
Yeah, so that's what I think it is.
But what I'm saying is that, yeah, that's why they couldn't just repudiate the Minsk agreement 8 years ago, and Russia now is like 100 times powerful than what happened, like what
Yeah.
Germany was way
Yeah.
back in that day. Like Russia has nukes, and it has one of the big. Still, they needed time to just be able to prepare for what is coming next.
Yeah.
Mm.
Figure out. However, we are in no way. Oh no, the Scheidelmans and the Kautskyites have hampered this movement.
The Schneidermans, and the Kautskyites have hampered this movement. We are helping it. That is the gist of the matter. Therein lies the fundamental difference. If our class enemies, the exploiters and the Scheidermans and the Kautskyites, lackeys, have missed any opportunity of strengthening both the German and international Soviet movement, of strengthening both the German and the international Soviet revolution, the blame lies with them. The Soviet revolution in Germany will strengthen the international Soviet movement, which is the strongest bulwark and the only reliable, invincible worldwide bulwark against the Treaty of Versailles and against international imperialism in general. This is absolutely true. Like, no words for it. Okay. To give absolute, like even right now, the biggest bulwark against imperialism is the country of China.
Yep.
To give absolute, categorical, and immediate precedence to liberation from the Treaty of Versailles, and to give it precedence over the question of liberating other countries oppressed by imperialism and the yoke of imperialism, is the Philistine nationalism worthy of the Kautsky's, Hilferdigs, Autos, and Bowers and Company. And that's the idea. Like, is that, yeah, the idea is that you don't prioritize like getting Ruhr Valley over freeing India, for example.
Yeah.
And it backfired on the Spanish anarchist movement because that's exactly what they did. And they allowed Franco was given a free passage to invade from Morocco.
Yep. To give absolute, categorical.
The overthrow of the bourgeoisie in any of the large European countries, including Germany, would be such a gain for the international revolution. For its sake, one can, and if necessary, should tolerate a more prolonged existence of the Treaty of Versailles. If Russia standing alone could endure the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk for several months to the advantage of the revolution, there is nothing impossible in a Soviet Germany, allied with Soviet Russia, enduring the existence of Treaty of Versailles for a longer period to the advantage of the revolution. Imperialists of France, Britain, etc. are trying to provoke and ensnare the communists. Say that you will not sign the Treaty of Versailles, they urge. Like babes. The leftist communists fall into the trap laid for them instead of skillfully maneuvering against a crafty and at present stronger enemy. Instead of telling him, we shall sign the Treaty of Versailles now. It is folly, not revolutionism, to deprive ourselves in advance of any freedom of action, openly to inform an enemy who is at present better armed than we are, whether we shall fight him and when. To accept battle at a time when it is obviously advantageous to the enemy but not us is criminal. Lavrov did exactly this. That's why he didn't accept the battle in 2014.
Yeah.
Political leaders of the revolutionary class are absolutely useless if they are incapable of changing tack or offering conciliation and compromise in order to take evasive action in a patently disadvantageous battle.
Yeah. All right. So that was no compromises. I don't know if you want to.
Yeah, let's take some comments.
Yeah, let's hold off and do the rest later, and then we'll just do comments and stuff. Okay. So, then we have the boss thing. All right. So, anyone have anything you want to say, or let's see?
Well, we have a lot of comments we didn't take yet, right?
Yeah. I have to go.
Okay, let's look at where. So I don't know, where do we start?
Only increases the police state. All right. Random chaos only increases the police state. It's like some people, when they randomly kill cops, it only backfires and it only makes them reinforce their authority.
Yes, like exactly. Random chaos, random act of terrorism is always used by the police state to do like a 9/11 level of crackdown, like, or the Reichstag fire.
Yeah. So we have to. It's basically you have to have the plan. So this is, I think, back when we were talking about the propaganda of the deed, but you have to have the backing of the people. Like, so you don't, like, the reason why like Blanqui wanted to do these like little, just a little secretive group going in and doing it, and why that wouldn't work is because, I mean, they already like say things like the Bolshevik Revolution was like a coup, but it's not really a coup because all the people were behind
It
it.
was a coup in the legal sense,
Yeah.
but after the coup, you had 100 million people willing to fight a world war on behalf of the Bolsheviks.
Yes.
So it shows you that it had. If the Bolsheviks did not have popular support, there would not be. So the Russian Civil War is a misnomer since 14 countries invaded at the same time. And these were just peasants with absolutely nothing, not even the clothes. They just had a hammer and sickle. Literally, they had hammers and sickles, while these imperialists had guns, tanks, airplanes, every weapon. And these 100 million peasants won because they were willing to fight that world war, which they would, like, they could have, the easiest thing would have been to run on the side of the whites and, like, close in, but they didn't do that because that it showed that they had popular support. So Lenin talks about high level participation, low level participation. Stupid elections are low level participation.
Yeah.
Having 100 million people give up their blood, flesh, and child to fight for you, that's a high level participation.
Yeah. Like so you have to like prioritize what you're doing and how it's going. But like I think it, like even the voting, like for me in Massachusetts, okay, so I go and I vote. I don't really care. I know who's gonna freaking win every election.
Doesn't matter
In Massachusetts, that doesn't matter. What I care about, I'll vote for the questions, because in Massachusetts they actually do act on, sometimes they like for the Medicaid, like so the universal health care, they only put it on 20 different ballots, like so 20 different counties had it, so not all the counties of Massachusetts had it, but like like the cannabis going, legalizing here and stuff like that, that was on the ballot, and they did listen to the people on that. Of course, then it goes to the point of when you were saying, like, them waiting until the people, for the people. So that's why I find those are important, because the people are behind it. You don't want to overstep, you don't want to push too fast for the people. You want when the people are there, that's when you should do the vote. Not years later, not, like
earlier.
Like gay marriage took forever, you know what I mean? Like, but they were making sure that everyone would be on board, and like it would just
the Supreme Court later decided, because rich property gay owners kind of like wanted to give their husbands their vacation home in Hawaii, right?
Yeah. So, it can't, and that's the whole thing. It comes down, like, it's convenient for them. Like, but our representatives don't really represent us, because, you didn't really hear Hillary and Obama and everything being on board with gay marriage until
after the Supreme Court ruled so.
It was already in Massachusetts for 10 years. It was.
And after the U.S. Supreme Court ruled it in that one case. That is escaping my head. Dan Cannon was the attorney for it. I can't remember.
Yeah.
The guy follows me on Twitter too, and I can't remember his name. Why can I not remember
It's all right.
his name?
Okay. It's a lot of stuff. All right. So, yeah, I'm not really. Anyone have any questions or anything you want to talk about?
Okay, let's see.
Seeing too much here.
I need more. Yeah, okay. Follow Mr. Piece of Work on Twitter if you're an ML. Or Mastodon.
Oh, Mastodon. Yeah. Yeah, they won't. For some reason, Twitter, I know that there's issues with that.
Mostly because we don't have enough mods. This is why it's so hard, because we need more mods.
So, yeah, we have, well, I don't know.
No, during Tsarist Russia, disabled people were worked to death. And this is 1920, during the Russian Civil War, when the Soviets literally had Moscow and St. Petersburg and the little line connecting them. That's all they had. And then they had to fight all the way over to the border of Poland. And then this way, they had to fight all the way to Vladivostok. But once the Soviet Union was established and then when you check up what happened to disabled people after World War II, there is night and day between Tsarist Russia and Soviet Russia.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, Brighton said he'll help us out. I know we have Petamilo is, I think we made him one, right?
Yeah, we'll make Brighton one too, but I can't right now. But
just reach out to me. Are you on Twitter? I hope. I'm Lumpy Lewish with an H, not an E.
Yes, I'm sorry.
Just reach out to me and I'll get you set up on there.
Okay. Let's see. Anything else? Aw, this is cute. Yes, we need more people we know in the chat with each other. Okay, let's do the weird kinky tweet. Why not?
Oh, okay. All right. Hold on. Let me.
Since we have, because I have about about 10 minutes left.
What did I do? Oh, crap.
I sent it to you.
Yeah. I know, but I by mistake I knocked down my. So just give me 1 second because I have I have to log in on my phone. I don't know why I knew I shut it off for some reason.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we'll do that. We'll do left-wing communist. He's really is very ruthless about the British left. We'll do it next time.
Log in. This is being weird. Or doesn't he? You know what? I probably should just be able to find it, but no, I shut down my WeChat and I shut down that comment.
Okay. I found it. I think. Let me see. Found it, Janet. I'll send it to you on private. Okay.
Yes, it's not allowing me to open my WeChat at the moment.
How do I? Wait, should I open it? Should I send it to you on private? Here?
Yeah. Send it here on private. On a message. And then I'll pull it.
Okay, I sent it on a private message.
So then I can pull it up here.
I feel bad, but why did this person tweet this out? It was just kind of weird to tweet it out.
Yes, it's very, very, very weird. Okay, I'm sharing.
Okay, so if you tweet it out, anything you tweet out is for public consumption, in my opinion.
Listen to me, Ann. You really don't ask for your kinks. Take it from me. I have a fucking Nazi kink. You know, there is a point that you don't have to say everything online.
Yeah, exactly. This
don't have to tell people certain things, but
if you have this kink, just keep it between you and your partner and don't tell us.
Yeah, I don't know. Sorry.
It seemed like a very random, weird thing to just tweet out randomly. Unprompted, of course.
Yeah, and you know, if you're being sarcastic.
No, he was being that person.
You're not being sarcastic.
He was being, like I said, and that's why I replied that I have a Yakov Pavlov kink. He's the guy who shot down, he killed so many Nazis that apparently there were too many bodies. He just took down the entire. But yeah, that's just gross, and no one else wanted to know about this.
Yeah. I mean, it's
Where
not
is the level. Okay, I'm just trying to figure out what is an acceptable thing to share versus what is what's the line on kink shaming in your opinion, Janet?
What's the line? I mean, I don't think people need to be telling unless you're on a site and you're using your kink and you're doing this stuff. I don't really need to know. I don't really need to know what your kinks are unless I know you personally. But I don't know.
So I'm trying to figure out. So what is acceptable to? I think. So when does the concept? Okay, if two people are engaging in whatever they're engaging, you should not shame them for engaging in that, right?
Yeah, I mean, a kink shame is if whatever. I mean, you like feet, you have foot fetish. But you
don't have to tweet that out.
The community of foot fetish people, do they really need to know you have a foot fetish? I mean, some people with foot fetish, you can tell right away because they keep asking you about your feet. Because I had a foot fetish guy come in. I have the ugliest freaking feet. I have the ugliest feet. I have Flintstone own feet. And I had a guy like, ooh, I'm like, ugh. I was at a party. I'm like, get me out of
Yeah.
but a Nazi kink. I think what they're trying to say.
I don't. Yeah. Okay. Maybe it's just. I don't want to know what it is. To be honest, I'm not trying to deeply think about what a Nazi.
I know, like my husband liked, like, when he was younger, he read a lot about World War II stuff, and he didn't like the Nazis, but he read a lot about World War II stuff. So is it just being interested in the history?
No. Because kink is being turned on by something.
Yeah, that would be, yeah. You like
somebody wearing an SS uniform. That would, like, I'm imagining Nazi kink is getting turned on by somebody wearing an SS uniform.
Yeah, no.
Well, like, and what you have to remember are Nazis are virgins in that they were all spoiled, like, aristocracy. Like, all the high Nazi officials were like like spoiled aristocracy who were like complete and utter snowflakes. The real Chads were the Soviets. They were like illiterate peasants who like just did amazing stuff.
I just put up Brighton's thing about this is going to get the bots back in the chat again.
All right. I don't know. Yeah, I mean, we still have like some time. So even though I don't have the energy to read a piece, I want to talk about something. So we were discussing this weird tweet, and yeah. So there is I'm trying to figure, but you know that when I say something is my kink, it's a joke, right?
Yeah,
that's
I mean,
okay. Like,
yeah, or I'll troll someone, like, if they say something and they seem like very passionate about it. I'm like, yeah, we don't need to know your kink, man. By
the way, there's Praxis Ben who wants to debate with me, and somebody asked me why I will debate with him, and I said if he has a humiliation fetish, I don't kink shame. But that's of course a joke. Yes. So when I say no kink shaping, it just means that you're being really. It's usually a joke. Like, it's not, obviously. I don't have a Yakov Pavlov kink.
You might have a Lenin kink. I don't know, but no, she thinks Lenin's more like father. Yes, father figure.
So I don't have a Lenin kink.
So no kink. No
what?
Kink. No kink. Because
I did not say that. I'm not sharing my kink.
I'm not sharing my kink. I don't know. I'm too old to have kinks anymore. I don't know.
I don't know. Yeah, it's a very strange topic, of course. Yeah.
Yes. Esha has Soviet fetishism.
Like I said, I'm not sure.
A lot of people say that. Yeah. Maybe.
Well, yesterday I looked at this like idiot think tanker who's like talking about towards the defeat of the Soviet Union again. Like, he wrote it yesterday, and I'm like, I wish the Soviet Union were around. It's like a totally diluted psycho article, but it's just, and it's from a serious think tank, like the Hudson. I can't remember which, some stupid, serious like neocon think tank, and they're so nuts. Like, they're just like drooling amongst themselves, like, and not glued to reality, right?
Yes, definitely. I have to see if I have my hillside. No, I might have thrown it away. I usually try to keep it around. I get a stupid conservative. What is it? Hillside College or Hillsdale?
That's in Michigan. Yeah. What about it?
Yeah, they mail me like once a month, or I don't know. I get the little mailer, and I was gonna tell them to go, F themselves and stop. But I'm like, you know what? They're wasting their money, and I like to keep it just to see what they were talking about. And
it's good to keep track of what they're saying. But what are they talking about these days?
I don't know. I don't know what I did with it because I had it sitting around here, but I don't know where I put it. Oh, here it is. All right, so here it is. It's the imprints or imprimis. American Christmas, American New Year. What he's talking about? He's talking about Charles Dickens. He's talking about.
I like Charles Dickens. He's one of my favorite authors. He's a very good author. I love everything he wrote.
Yes, so
he knows how to bring characters alive. That's why I love Charles Dickens.
So he went to a Charles Dickens reading. So he's going to go off on like how we've like destroyed Christmas now, I guess.
No, because you know that Charles Dickens was one of the first working class authors, as in he wrote like what he did was he did not write it in like book form. Back then books were expensive, so he wrote like little pamphlet forms and working class people would be able to buy it for 29 pence. And he was widely widely what was he? Widely distributed, and people would have like reading circles and read to each other. And yeah, so Charles Dickens would not be approving of any of these
Okay,
reactionaries.
I'm looking at this. So he's like basically saying like America has made Christmas, like, you know, from, I don't know why, because he's using Dickens, but he's saying it's American, but whatever. Dickens to Die Hard is English.
He never came to America.
No, no. But you know, whatever he's saying, from Dickens to Die Hard, America, from Dickens to Die Hard, running through and making possible all these charming and uplifting stories that have become part of American Christmas.
Die Hard is not an uplifting story. It's a great movie, but it's not an uplifting.
And Dickens is English. Okay, but huh?
Okay.
Yeah, but
Dickens is an American, and Die Hard is not uplifting. I love it. It's a great action-packed movie, but it's not uplifting.
But then so I'm like, I was just thinking the other day how like Santa is such a all right, so this is my thing. This is my thing with Santa. Like, if you think of it, like every other religion, you're doing something that happened in the past. So you're symbolizing, like a menorah is symbolizing something that happened in the past, and they're lighting the menorah. The Christmas
tree. Saint Nicholas was an actual bishop in modern day Syria. Yes. So in Russia, there are two different characters: Ded Moroz, which means grandfather winter. And then there's St. Nicholas. And the way they draw St. Nicholas, he's a patron saint. He's very thin. He's almost black skin, very dark. But what?
So all right. So with Santa, it's like such an Americanized thing when we took Coca-Cola and we did Santa. But now you're sitting there, and this is what makes it like such a Christian national thing, is that we use Santa and we popularize this character in America more so than, you know, most of the world, and that he's still like, he's in the now and he's coming to people's houses, but he's missing people's houses. Like you kids, you're bad kids because he ain't come to your house. So they're using something in the now that's like just totally looking down on other religions. Like that is my
and because poor people too, because they're giving them message that if you don't get
if you would do it as a symbolize, if the parents said, like, look, you know, we used to have the saint, and you know, like you can have the story, but you're giving the gift to the kids. Like, it's not that is missing these houses now. You know what I mean?
No. The reason why the Saint Nicholas, apparently there were people who couldn't pay the dowry for their daughters, and he actually literally dropped money. Like, he threw the money over their gate because he knew they were too ashamed to take it.
Yeah, throw it in their windows if they have.
He would throw it. But that's where the tradition. But you could say it's because Saint Nicholas did this way back then in Syria. Of course, they don't want to confuse people, because then that would mean Saint Nicholas was not white. And in Russia, they draw him more to look like what he actually looked like.
Turkey or Syria? Syria.
Well, back then it was, but right now that city Myra is in Syria right now.
Oh, okay, all right, okay.
Back then it was Turkey.
All right, so that's all I had. Like, I was sitting there thinking that. So he's I don't know what these are so ridiculous. I get him, like, I think it's like once a month, or it could be every quarter.
That's weird. Yeah, I mean, it's good to keep tabs on all this weird psycho. Yesterday another, like, okay. So basically, there was a chart that was not even advocating for a certain kind of heat. It was just saying the difference between heating people versus heating, like centralized heat versus not. It was literally explaining the different kinds of ways to heat your home. Yeah. It was not advocating, but it really, like, this comment, this like right winger, it just like, he was like, oh my God, like the left is like this, and then he was like something about Soviet Russia, Stalin, and I'm like, wait a minute, you just looked at a chart of like explaining all the different ways you can heat the home. It's just informational. It was not advocating, and just having this information made him freak out.
I don't know. They right wingers like and they don't want to give it up. Like you can even prove, like you tell them, okay, like look at this is showing, and they're still like, nope, no, they still want to steal Christmas from us, or they still like the whole thing about like the non-religion. I'm like, like I get like communists, like like I get
No, I mean, communist. Okay, that's a
they
big myth. The
just
reason
yeah,
what,
that's what I'm saying.
let
Like,
me can I just explain this real quickly. Communists were not against religion per se in the beginning, but then when you got all these bloody cat priests that were like collaborating with Nazis, including like there is Joseph Tiso, who was the head of the puppet Slovakian government, the Ushtazi, they
yeah,
had to be cracked down upon. And the US used the fact that they were cracking down on these fucking Nazi priests, but you can't, like, if you were to manufacture consent and to scare religious conservatives in America, you can't be like, oh, they're cracking down on these fucking Nazi
yeah,
priests that crucified children and hung them from meat hooks, because that's not going to be like, anybody's going to think that you need to crack down on that.
yeah.
So then the Cold War mythology was communists are against religion, but
Mm-hmm.
now they were cracking down on these bloody Nazi priests who literally had no limits. Read our article about the Archbishop Stepanich. In the Vatican, you'd be like, the Vatican was the first country to recognize Adolf Hitler, and these bloody priests were very, very supportive of the Holocaust.
Yeah,
So that is where, so the communists were not even anti-religion or anything, but they did crack down on fucking Nazi priests. But the Cold War mythology, in order to manufacture consent, was
yeah.
that they're cracking down on
They
religion.
changed the Pledge of Allegiance. They put under God in it. Right,
Yeah,
right at that point to say like, look, those the Soviets are
well,
all heathens. They're not religious, but it's like a lot of the
no,
people
they were
were
literally, you know,
religious.
that in 1941, they had the patriarch, which is like the Pope of Moscow, come and bless the Red Army before. And then there's even a song that talks about the Great Holy War.
Yeah,
And so when Putin talks about the West being satanic and the Great Holy War, he's actually kind of echoing Stalin's rhetoric,
yeah,
literally identical. Because, and it is, I mean, if we're not, yeah, and so, um, they were not cracking down on religion, but they were cracking down on fucking Nazi priests who collaborated. And the West wanted to not have them not crack down on these fucking Nazi priests. And so that's where you got the anti-religion. But they were also not going to allow you to have like crazy private schools where you teach stupid shit to your children.
yeah,
Everyone had to have the same school. So having rules is not the same. Like, so they also make the claim that DPRK is against Christianity. No, they're not.
no,
They're against US NGOs who are come and do psychotic stuff. So Kim Il Sung, Kim Jong Un's grandfather's dad went to a Protestant school. They were Protestant. The first prime minister of North Korea was a Protestant priest. So they were not against Christianity or any religion. They're just against US NGOs masquerading as religious schools coming in and like in Pakistan too.
yeah. They
If
use the
Pakistan had
religion.
done this way back then, and cracked down on stupid US like jihadi schools, there would have been no 9/11.
Yeah, yeah, and it's just like it's like, so when they were spreading religion, even like in China, like way back when they went in, with the missionaries and stuff, and they knew the missionaries weren't up to any good, but they had to like in China they had it because the Chinese always had like the ancestry worship and
Yeah.
stuff like that. That it was more like family or like Buddhism or
Mm-hmm.
Confucianism or like more of a philosophy, and then
Mm-hmm.
also worshiping your family, your ancestry.
There's also plenty of Chinese Christians, Chinese Muslims that predated anything British or
Yeah,
American.
yeah. So then what the Christians had to do then for China was say, oh, you can hold more than one religion. They wouldn't say it for the rest of the world, but it was the
Yeah,
only way that they were going to get a foothold in China was to tell them.
but they still didn't get a foothold in China. They're like there's a lot of Christians because there's a lot of people in China, but it's still like a insular community.
Yeah, yeah, and that's the whole thing too. When you talk about religions, like you have to think about too, like I know people who are religious and they are good people. They don't push their religion. They just have these beliefs,
Yeah,
and that's perfectly fine. Like It's the establishment. You're talking about like Rome. You're
Yeah.
talking about the Vatican. You're talking about,
Yeah,
you
well,
know,
in China too, they tried to say that they're cracking down on Islam. No, they're not letting psychotic jihadi schools in. And that's what China means when they say Islam with Chinese characteristics, is that they are going to build Islamic universities and not having the psycho Saudis like teach hate. And so you get a lot of Chinese Muslim scholars who are very educated. They know Arabic. They're just built their own schools, and that's when the U.S. spread stupid lies. China's cracking down on Islam.
So Carlos is, let me get into this. So Carlos is saying about religion in Nicaragua happened that the Sandinista government in the 80s wasn't against any religion, but the Catholic oligarchy was against the government, helping the Contras.
Yep. And they had to be cracked down upon. If you're gonna help, you're not with God. If you're gonna like behead, whatever the psychotic shit. The Contras did one of the most I can't even explain how psychotic the Contras were.
And then he says that the Sandinista government declared there was no contradiction between revolution and religion. So it's not like it's not like that people are against religion. It's just against establishments, that hierarchy.
And once you collect, I mean, I don't know, like I've written articles. I can't go through what the Contras did. Really evil stuff. Like it's undescribable how evil they were.
Yeah, and so faith is good, the church is bad. That's basically everything I was saying in one concise sentence, because I can't concisely, because I'm incapable of that.
Yeah, but that's when you get the rumors, and then but so yeah, the Soviets did not crack down on religions, but they did crack down on Nazi priests. They had no mercy for them. And
I mean, like someone said, like I had what's that thing that you can pull? I can wear it on my head, but I can pull it down, and I was wearing it as a mask at the beginning of the thing, whatever it is. But I had this thing that had Shay all over it, and I had posted. Yeah, Shay Guevara. So I had Shay on there, and everyone's like, "Oh, you know that he was against gay people."
Who's Shay? Shay Guevara.
Yeah.
Oh no, he was not against gay people.
That's the whole thing. And I'm like, no, he wasn't. And they're like, oh, well, he killed this one. Well, he killed that one because he was against them.
Yeah, but yeah, Fidel, like there was a time when they thought, okay, so a lot of times in the East they believe like the West. Well, Cuba's not the East, but because Westerners have a lot of money, they'll come to India and be pedophiles. So Western people are identified with a lot of deviant behavior, right?
Yeah.
And this is real. Like sex, like there's a joke among Asian DM groups where we call people sex pats, because we know that's exactly what they're doing when they go to China or Vietnam or India. Yeah, they're not expats, but we call them sex pats.
Yeah.
So it is. So then, when you get a new idea coming from the West, like it's hard. You might just you're instinctively like, no. And so that's kind of what happened in Cuba with homosexuality for a little while. But Fidel Castro apologized. I even put that up in one of my TikToks, which got banned. And he said we didn't know what homosexuality was. We didn't have the research, the science. So at first we thought it was like a deviation coming from West. I mean, and what you have to remember was that Cuba was like a sex trafficking place for like hundreds of years, where Americans would go and like rape 8-year-old girls. So sometimes there is a lot happens when the imperialism, the sex tourism just kind of meld together. So there is like sometimes you will get instinctive things like that, but then after that, Cuba has a medical institute. They did research, and then they came out more advanced than the US with regards to AIDS and gay rights right now. So
yeah, but it's easy. It's easy for them to use that propaganda, because they can say, because of
at the same time the US was like having its lavender crackdown, and US was exactly. So what they'll do the same thing with Stalin. They're like, he was homo. No, he wasn't. He didn't say a single thing about gay sex at all. No. Like he had no opinion about it, because he had a world war to worry about, and he couldn't really like prioritize this, right?
Yeah. But they'll believe, like, so all the United States has to say is point to one thing, because they got everyone believing in identity politics, that, like, not intersectionality, but identity politics. So
yeah,
because Condi
and it's
Rice was a
funny because
black
I
woman,
always
Condi
in the
Rice wasn't a
90s.
bad person because she's a black woman, right? That's what I'm supposed to believe.
Who?
Condi Rice. So I'm supposed to believe that Condi
Condi
Rice,
Rice is it? Oh, I see what
because she was
Condoleezza
a
Rice.
black
Yes.
woman, I should, because I, like, I'm told, as identity politics, Condi Rice is an awesome person to have in that position because she's a
He
black woman.
destroyed Iraq.
So, like, yeah, so it's, yeah, I mean, that's what I'm saying. Like, so they can use that to propagandize. It's easier to propagandize USians because of the fact that they already have this whole identity politics attitude,
Yes.
because it's pushed on us, like we're
Yeah, in Russia, I don't see any. It's so nice to not have identity politics at all. Like, it's very interesting and nice, and people actually don't understand identity politics and racist dog whistles here. So sometimes they'll share something that Tucker said because they are not understanding
yeah.
that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like they just don't get a lot of the American. It's very the racial class. It's very peculiar to America that just doesn't register in their minds.
Yeah, and but, like, on the other hand of that, so say that we are having, the thing with the trans rights, and that being, like, a top priority for, like, not really a priority, not
For
like
most of the world,
being,
a lot
being
of them are very confused about like
yeah, because they
in
don't
China.
understand. But it's America push. That's what you're saying. Like, America's pushing this, and it's not that the Democrats or the Republicans are actually supporting the trans, but they're pushing it. The Democrats are pushing it like they support the trans, but they have shown that they haven't totally. But they use this, and so they're using them as an identity politics. So then the rest of the world is seeing this, and they're like, "What is going on?" You know what I mean? So
Yeah,
that is why some things appear like not right. Like, these people aren't
yeah,
thinking correctly on this. It's just that they're ignorant of it.
yeah.
But
So
they're
there
also
was
cautious of it because of the way America's pushing it out.
okay. So this Qatari foreign minister actually kind of like Piers Morgan, who's a fucking reactionary, asked, "Are gay people? Can gay people feel safe in Qatar?" And he said, "Everyone can feel safe in Qatar." And then he said, "Can people kiss?" And then he was like, "Actually, straight people can't kiss in Qatar because we have a different concept of public affection than you guys. So holding hands is okay for anyone." He asked for gay people. He's like, anyone can hold hands, but then if you're going to kiss in public, we just think it's too much. We don't think that's appropriate in Qatar.
Yeah.
So while I so it doesn't mean like they just have a different standard of acceptability for both gay and straight people. I'm not saying Qatar is good. I don't know what actually their policy is, but this is what the foreign minister said. So it's like often, and of course, Piers Morgan does not care about gay people or straight people.
No,
He
but
just
he's going
wanted
to
to
use
be
it.
against
That's
Qatar,
the whole thing too.
against their World Cup.
We talk about, all right, when we get to this point and we have like this, the communist revolution, and now we've gone through all the phases of it, and we've gotten to a point where we can pretty much like group ourselves like where we want to be and who we want to be around, and what we, you can have these things. There might be a community that, doesn't believe something that you believe. But you have to understand that of that community. If you're going to go into that community, you need to understand that, you have to be respectful of that. But also, you can try to teach them, this is the way it's supposed to be. But you have to kind of have respect for that too. Like, you can't just like go to Qatar and be making out on the street then. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, but even if you're straight, you can't make out on the street in Qatar.
Yeah,
in India.
that's what I'm saying. Or like, if that's their policy, that public displays of public affection is wrong, and it's wrong for everyone, you can't just go and think that you're going to be perfectly fine going there and as a protest doing it. You know what I mean? Like,
exactly. And you shouldn't, if you don't live there, you shouldn't be protesting because it's not your country and you don't. So, so a lot of times people think that the dress code maybe in like Iran is draconian, but good luck dressing any different than you dress in Iran, in India. You're gonna get people are gonna start harassing you. It's just you can't, like, everyone in India kind of dresses like people, like, or everything, like, you're just because of the environment. But
Yeah.
people don't understand, like, there's a social pressure. Like in India, you more or less dress a lot, unless you're in like specific little areas in Bombay. You're going to be, most of India, you're going to be dressing exactly like people. 90% of India, if you're traveling through, you'll have to dress exactly like people dress in Iran, because that's just the way the culture is.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, so it is that. It's also having. I feel like that comes from the West. Like that is a Western superior. You know, we're more superior because we believe this. But in the background, there also a woman goes out dressed in a low cut dress or something like that, and they're like, and that same person that's like, oh, how dare you want this dress code, they're like, she's a slut, she's, she's this, she's that.
Yeah.
It's the
Yeah,
same
no, but
people
then,
making that comment as making the same comment here that make
yeah.
women feel uncomfortable dressing that way, you know what I mean? Like, so
Exactly. And
that
another
is
thing
kind
is
of
that
the
I just want people in the West to understand how okay, you know which country has a lower gender wage gap, USA or Saudi Arabia?
USA or Saudi Arabia.
Lower
Probably
gender wage
Saudi
gap.
Arabia.
Saudi Arabia, yes. So even though a woman has to cover head to toe there, when she goes to work, she is treated much more like an equal than here in the not
Yeah.
here, but here in Russia, there in the US. So dress, like, they're not related to each other, if that makes sense.
Yeah. But it's also so the women of Saudi Arabia are the ones that need to go forth with that protest. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? And I know
And
it's dangerous for them and that we need support from behind, but we can't go into that
but not
country.
when it's color revolution shit.
Yeah, yeah. We can't go in there
And
and force it. Like we can't force the hand of it. We can only be an ally. We can be in the back and
yeah.
try to
But
help
like a
move
lot
them.
of Saudi women see that they're dressed like in Saudi Arabia, the rumor is that you have to cover head to toe. No, you just kind of have to wear a scarf, basically. It's
Yeah,
not that different from Iran. So most women don't cover head to toe unless some do. But a lot of them think it's like a sari. Like they like it. It's their national dress, so they can wear it. And so it comes in like there are 100 different fashions. It comes in different colors. So they might not choose what you choose, and that's hard for a lot of Westerners to understand that.
so Saudi has a National Women's Day, I believe. I'm not positive on
I'm not positive. Let me check on this. So it is very complicated. I've worked enough with Saudi people to know that, like, it's very hard. It's not clear cut like they say in the U.S. It's complicated, is what I'm going to
that. So
say.
Carlos is saying in Nicaragua they don't have homosexual marriage, but there's also the case that a marriage is like a contract. I don't like. I am married, but I am married because it was my second marriage, and he and I did not plan on getting married. We were friends for a long, long time, and stuff like that before we even got together. So, but we got married because I needed the health care, and so it's there's also a whole thing like, is it kind of bourgeoisie to even like push for gay marriage, because marriage is a contract and it's more of a feudalistic capitalist kind of
Yeah. I mean,
concept.
back in the olden days, it was like a mutual hostage exchange. How do I know you're going to fill your contract? You give me your son, I'll give you my daughter. Hostage exchange. That was what marriage was historically.
So I mean, there's just so, I mean, it's so much, but it's so easy. This is why it's so easy for them to tell you, like, to use that propaganda against another country. So that's why, like, you really gotta worry about your own country and what's happening under your own
Yeah.
country. Like yeah, it sucks that some of these countries may not have gay
Do
marriage.
it. You're going to do
But it's also, it's not something that we can change for that country. Like
it. Nor should you, because if you accept the idea of sovereignty, then people in that country, and And if you're a Marxist-Leninist, you know that eventually people will take control because it just has to happen that way. Like it's like when you have 100 people versus one person with a machine gun, they can wrest it away. So eventually, but a lot of times the reason why you have these dictatorships is the imperial yoke on their boot.
Like the people that were mad that the Bolsheviks didn't come out and help fight for socialism in other countries and stuff. Like
that whole thing, third world country, like it's kind of like expecting Somalia to come and fight for Black Lives Matter in the U.S. That's just ridiculous.
Exactly. Like you can't have it that way. You have to do your own stuff. And yes, some conditions it's more dangerous.
Like China came and helped Korea in 1950. But it was a very specific condition, and they did a very specific task. But they did help Korea. So it is possible. And Vietnam help liberate Cambodia from Pol Pot.
Russia and Donetsk and
but that's a different situation. Like,
but I mean, Vietnam, like the people there were asking them to, like the people there were asking. So it was the people's choice for that.
Yeah, but I'm saying the more equivalent economic situation would be probably Vietnam liberating Cambodia in 1979 when they had just gone through the devastation of war. So that is the most equivalent situation, and so that happens once in a while. But it's asking Russia to liberate any other country back in 1920 would be like asking Somalia to come and help Black Lives Matter right now, which is just ridiculous.
I'm on the side of the argument. Yeah, so Byron's thoughts is just basically,
there's no reason to recognize marriage. It can be a religious kind of whatever people. I don't know.
I mean, but if the people want it, like if they want it, then they fight for it, and they, should get it.
Yeah.
I mean, like so that that it's one of those things that you leave up to what the fights are, and it always has to come from the people. Like everything has to come from the people. So like in that sense, like. The people of that country need to rise up against their country.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? Like you can't expect us to do it. Yeah.
And if the U.S. government or the U.S. news media is saying the people is rising up, there's 100% chance it's a color revolution. And in Vietnam, about 4 years ago, they tried to do some kind of color revolution that included like some sort of that masqueraded as a gay rights. But gay rights is not helped when you privatize the water and then like make their river inflammable.
Yeah. I mean, like if you care about gay people, you have to care about their well-being, not just the fact that they can, be married to one another, Yeah.
After you privatize the river and make it catch on fire.
And the marriage, and I want to say, like in the United States, it is important for gay people to be able to marry in the United States because of what we live under. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
So, like the fact that like I married my husband, we weren't planning on getting married. He needed healthcare. Like that's what drove us to get married was his need of healthcare is what drove us. And we would still be together. We would have been perfectly fine. We weren't having kids or anything like that. So, but I mean, it is like that drove us to get married.
Yeah, and I've seen people get divorced because of healthcare too.
On the other hand of it, like
a country with universal healthcare, maybe the factors of what constitutes marriage or whether marriage, it might be a different decision.
Yeah, that's exactly. So, like, if you have like the clean water in place, if you have the healthcare in place, you have certain things in place, then maybe that whole fighting for the marriage thing isn't as important.
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm saying? Like, because then it's not as necessary and it doesn't give you equity or equality to other people because you're missing out on things because of the fact that you can't get married.
Yep.
So,
by the way, next week, shall we come back at the same time to finish this piece?
Yeah, we can do Tuesday at 10.
Okay. And we'll have to figure out what to appropriately call this TV
I know.
show.
We're not really late night. We're kind of like all over the place with Lenin. No, we're like...
Yeah, we're not sure. Like We'll have to figure. Maybe you guys can help us come up with a nice name, like Late Nights with Lenin.
Yeah, we need something not late night
Catchy.
anymore since Asha's late night is my mid-afternoon.
Yeah. And it's
So
early morning, evening, I don't know. So help us come up with a. If you think of a catchy title for our our YouTube show, reply below and help us.
yes.
Okay. With that, Svobodu narodu, smrti fašizmu.
Bye everyone.